What if the Knights Templar, history's most fearsome warriors, were secretly initiates of a hidden religion? This video explores the shocking possibility that their true allegiance lay not with the Church, but with a forbidden spiritual doctrine so dangerous it sealed their doom. This video unearths the controversial connection between the Knights Templar and Baphomet, a mysterious figure condemned as a demonic idol by the medieval Church, exploring accusations of secret rituals, forbidden knowledge, and a deity that defied the rigid doctrines of the era. These accusations ultimately led to their brutal persecution, the dissolution of their powerful order, and the systematic rewriting of history to erase their true legacy. We'll uncover the hidden meanings behind Baphomet's androgynous symbolism, the true nature of the Templars' alleged heretical beliefs that so threatened the Church, revealing a potential link to ancient Gnostic traditions and a shocking motive behind their persecution that has been obscured for centuries, as well as their potential for intentional martyrdom as a final act of defiance and a guarantee of their lasting legacy. This video will challenge the conventional historical narrative of the Knights Templar, arguing that their alleged worship of Baphomet was not a descent into heresy, but a deliberate embrace of a suppressed spiritual knowledge that threatened the very foundations of the medieval Church, and served as their key to unlocking an act of intentional martyrdom, guaranteeing their place in history as defiant martyrs. Now, while many dismiss these claims as mere conspiracy theories fueled by anti-religious sentiment and occult fantasies, the enduring fascination with the Templars, the persistent accusations of heresy, and the mysterious nature of their sudden downfall suggest that there may be more to this story than meets the eye. Tapping into a deeper fear of suppressed knowledge and the potential for alternative spiritual paths, a fear that powerful institutions have long sought to control. Let's begin by exploring the origins of the Knights Templar, examining the historical context that gave rise to their immense power and influence, and the seeds of dissent that led to the explosive accusations against them, intentionally setting the stage for their final, dramatic act. To truly grasp the enigma of the Knights Templar and the accusations levied against them, we must first establish the historical context in which they arose, tracing their journey from humble protectors of pilgrims to a powerful, secretive order shrouded in suspicion, and ultimately martyrdom. What began as a noble mission would soon transform into something far more complex, a story of ambition, faith, betrayal, and perhaps forbidden knowledge. The late 11th century witnessed the fervor of the Crusades, a series of religious wars aimed at reclaiming the Holy Land from Muslim control. In 1099, Christian forces captured Jerusalem, establishing a fragile foothold in the region. However, the journey for pilgrims traveling to these sacred sites was fraught with peril, as bandits and warring factions roamed the countryside. It was in this turbulent environment that, in 1119 AD, a French nobleman named Hugues de Payens, along with 8 other knights, approached King Baldwin II of Jerusalem with a proposition: to form a dedicated order of knights whose sole purpose was to protect pilgrims traveling to and from the holy sites. These knights, initially few in number, took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, dedicating their lives to God and the protection of Christians. This humble beginning belied the immense power and wealth that the Knights Templar would eventually amass, a transformation that would ultimately contribute to their downfall and their decision for the intentional sacrifice for their cause. But where did the name Baphomet come from, the entity at the heart of the accusations against the Templars? The origins of Baphomet remain shrouded in mystery, with no clear historical records existing prior to the Templar trials. The name itself is obscure, with various theories proposed regarding its etymology. Some scholars suggest a connection to the word baptism, while others propose that it is a corruption of Mahomet, an archaic spelling of Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. Early depictions of Baphomet are vague and inconsistent, often portraying a generic idol or a vaguely human figure. It wasn't until later, particularly in the 19th century, that Baphomet became associated with the iconic image of a goat-headed figure, largely due to the influence of occultist Eliphas Levi. This association with pagan deities and fertility cults further fueled the accusations of heresy against the Templars, ultimately obscuring the truth, whatever that truth may be, and potentially hiding the motive behind their actions: intentional martyrdom. The year 1307 marked a turning point in the history of the Knights Templar. King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the order and eager to seize their vast wealth, launched a coordinated attack, arresting Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Templars, along with numerous other members of the order. Accusations of heresy were leveled against them, including the denial of Christ, spitting on the cross during initiation rituals, and most notably, the worship of an idol known as Baphomet. Under intense torture, many Templars confessed to these charges, providing seemingly damning evidence against the order. However, these confessions were riddled with inconsistencies and obtained under duress, raising serious questions about their validity. But what if the inconsistencies were intentional? What if they were meant to obscure the truth, while simultaneously providing enough evidence to secure their place in history? What was the real significance of these accusations? The trial of the Knights Templar was undoubtedly a complex affair, driven by a confluence of political, economic, and religious motivations. King Philip IV, locked in a power struggle with the papacy, saw an opportunity to assert his authority and free himself from his crippling debt to the Templars by seizing their assets. The Church, wary of unorthodox beliefs and secret societies, was easily persuaded to support Philip's actions. But beyond these pragmatic considerations, the accusations themselves held a certain symbolic weight. Baphomet, as a figure of androgyny and composite symbolism, could be interpreted as a representation of suppressed knowledge, a challenge to the rigid dogma of the Church, or even a symbol of spiritual rebellion. The accusations, true or false, tapped into deeper anxieties about power, authority, and the control of knowledge, and perhaps, most importantly, set the stage for their self-sacrifice. The historical controversies surrounding the Templar trials and the question of their guilt or innocence continue to this day. The accusations of heresy and the enduring fascination with the Templars in occult circles hint at a deeper, more esoteric meaning behind the events of the 14th century. But could there be a connection to Gnostic traditions or other forms of suppressed spiritual knowledge, deliberately obscured by those in power? It is this enduring mystery, this tantalizing possibility of a hidden truth, that draws us into the next stage of our exploration: the occult interpretations of Baphomet and the Templars' alleged secret beliefs, potentially setting the stage for their willing demise. Of course, it's essential to address the counterargument that the Templars were simply victims of political persecution. King Philip IV undoubtedly had strong motivations for targeting the Templars, including his debt to the order and his desire to consolidate power. Propaganda and misinformation played a significant role in shaping public opinion against the Templars, and the inconsistencies in the accusations, coupled with the coerced nature of the confessions, suggest a deliberate attempt to frame them. But while political factors undoubtedly played a role, they don't fully explain the persistence and nature of the accusations, particularly the strange figure of Baphomet. If it were purely a political plot, why the focus on such bizarre and seemingly irrational charges? Despite the political machinations and the inconsistencies in the trial, the accusations against the Templars, particularly regarding Baphomet, continue to resonate, hinting at a deeper, more complex story. While they may not have been guilty of the specific charges leveled against them, it's possible that the Templars were involved in unorthodox spiritual practices, or at the very least, were perceived to be. The mystery surrounding the Templars and Baphomet continues to fascinate and inspire speculation, suggesting that there may be more to this story than meets the eye. Could it be that the Templars, sensing their impending doom, chose to embrace martyrdom as a final act of defiance, a way to ensure their legacy and protect their secrets from those who sought to destroy them? What we'll uncover next is even more shocking, revealing the esoteric interpretations of Baphomet that could unlock the truth behind the Templars' alleged heresies and reveal the nature of their ultimate sacrifice. As we've seen, the trial of the Knights Templar was a complex web of political intrigue, religious fervor, and perhaps a deliberate attempt to rewrite history. But what if the accusations against them, particularly the worship of Baphomet, were not simply fabricated charges, but distorted reflections of genuine esoteric beliefs? This brings us to the crucial transition, from verifiable historical accounts of the Templar trials to the more shadowy realm of esoteric interpretations, where Baphomet takes on a new and far more complex significance. We must acknowledge that we are moving into more speculative territory, separating ourselves from demonstrable historical facts and entering a world of symbolism, hidden meanings, and alternative spiritual traditions. Yet the enduring fascination with the Templars in occult circles suggests that their story holds a deeper, more enigmatic truth, a truth that may be encoded within the very figure of Baphomet himself, waiting to be deciphered. The centuries following the Templar trials witnessed a resurgence of interest in ancient wisdom, alchemy, and the occult sciences, creating fertile ground for the reinterpretation of Baphomet. This period, known as the Renaissance, saw a revival of Hermeticism and Neoplatonism, philosophical systems that emphasized the interconnectedness of all things and the existence of hidden knowledge accessible only to initiates. Key figures such as Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola translated and disseminated ancient texts, sparking a renewed interest in esoteric traditions. Later figures like Eliphas Levi, the 19th-century French occultist, would become instrumental in shaping the modern image of Baphomet, transforming it from a vague accusation into a potent symbol of spiritual and alchemical transformation. Simultaneously, secret societies like the Rosicrucians and Freemasons emerged, drawing inspiration from Templar legends and further contributing to the aura of mystery surrounding the order. These societies, with their emphasis on symbolism, ritual, and hidden knowledge, provided a framework for interpreting Baphomet as something far more profound than a mere idol of heresy. To truly understand the occult interpretations of Baphomet, we must delve into its symbolism, recognizing that it represents far more than a simple deity or idol. Central to this interpretation is the androgynous form of Baphomet, embodying the union of opposites, male and female, spirit and matter, good and evil. This duality is not seen as a conflict, but as a necessary balance, a harmonious integration of opposing forces. The goat's head, often associated with the pagan god Pan or the Sabbatic goat, symbolizes primal energy, fertility, and the untamed forces of nature. However, it also represents the scapegoat, the one who carries the sins of the community, hinting at the Templars' own persecution. The caduceus, with its intertwined serpents, represents the Kundalini energy, the life force that, according to Eastern traditions, lies dormant at the base of the spine and can be awakened through spiritual practice. Ultimately, Baphomet, in occult terms, represents the potential for spiritual illumination, the awakening of hidden knowledge, and the transcendence of duality, which might have been the true aim of the Templars, leading them to their destiny. But how has Baphomet been used in occult rituals and magical practices throughout history? Eliphas Levi, who is essential to Baphomet's modern image, described Baphomet as a symbol of the absolute, a representation of the divine in its entirety. He incorporated Baphomet into his magical practices, viewing it as a tool for achieving spiritual transformation and union with the divine. Aleister Crowley, another influential occultist, also embraced Baphomet, incorporating it into his system of the lemma as a symbol of the union of opposites and the attainment of spiritual enlightenment. In certain occult traditions, Baphomet is invoked as a symbol of empowerment, a force that can help individuals overcome their limitations and achieve their full potential. However, it is crucial to approach the invocation of Baphomet with caution and respect, recognizing the potential dangers and ethical considerations involved. Like any powerful symbol, Baphomet can be misinterpreted and misused, leading to spiritual imbalance or even psychological harm, a warning we must heed when considering its role in the Templars' story. What then is the significance of these occult interpretations of Baphomet in relation to the Knights Templar? Could it be that the Templars possessed a form of hidden spiritual knowledge, perhaps gained during their time in the Holy Land, that was later encoded in the symbolism of Baphomet? Some scholars suggest that the Templars may have been initiated into esoteric traditions, encountering mystical practices from various cultures during their crusades. The accusations of heresy against the Templars, particularly the charge of worshipping Baphomet, could be interpreted as a deliberate attempt to suppress their unorthodox spiritual beliefs, which threatened the established dogma of the Church. Perhaps the Templars discovered something in the East, a secret that challenged the very foundations of Christianity, and Baphomet became a symbol of this forbidden knowledge, a knowledge they were willing to die for. But where did this forbidden knowledge come from? This leads us to an even more intriguing possibility, a connection between the Knights Templar and the ancient Gnostic traditions. Gnosticism, a diverse collection of religious and philosophical beliefs that flourished in the early centuries of the Christian era, posited that the material world was created by a flawed and malevolent god, known as the Demiurge, and that true salvation could only be achieved through inner knowledge or gnosis. While the direct historical links between the Templars and Gnosticism are tenuous, some researchers suggest that the Templars may have been influenced by Gnostic ideas, either directly or indirectly, through their contacts in the East or through the survival of Gnostic beliefs within certain Christian communities. Could the Templars have embraced a Gnostic perspective, viewing the Church as a tool of the Demiurge and seeking a deeper, more personal connection with the divine? This theory certainly adds another layer of intrigue to the Templar mystery, painting them as not just victims of political persecution, but as potential guardians of an ancient heresy. Of course, it's crucial to address the argument that these occult interpretations of Baphomet are anachronistic, imposing modern esoteric ideas onto a medieval context. Indeed, it's easy to fall into the trap of projecting our own beliefs and interpretations onto the past, attributing meanings to symbols and practices that were never intended. Reconstructing the beliefs and practices of the Templars based on limited historical evidence is a challenging task, and it's important to distinguish between historical fact and speculative interpretation. The image of Baphomet as we know it today is largely a creation of 19th century occultists, centuries after the demise of the Templars. Therefore, can we truly claim that the Templars themselves would have recognized or understood this modern interpretation of Baphomet? Despite these valid concerns, the enduring symbolic power of Baphomet and the Templars' connection to it warrants exploration, even if it remains speculative. Even if the Templars weren't consciously worshipping a goat-headed deity representing the union of opposites, the fact that they were accused of doing so, and that this accusation continues to resonate in occult circles, speaks to a deeper archetypal theme, revealing their potential for intentional martyrdom. The Templars' story taps into our fascination with hidden knowledge, spiritual rebellion, and the persecution of those who challenge established authority. Ultimately, regardless of the historical accuracy of occult interpretations, they offer valuable insights into the enduring power of symbols and the human quest for spiritual meaning, even in the face of death. But what if the Templars didn't just stumble upon this forbidden knowledge, but actively sought it out, knowing the price they would have to pay? What if their martyrdom was not a tragic accident, but a carefully orchestrated act of defiance, designed to ensure the survival of their secrets and their lasting legacy. The answer, it turns out, may be even more disturbing than we could have imagined, potentially changing the way we view the Knights Templar forever. As we've explored the potential for forbidden knowledge influencing the Knights Templar, the question remains, where did this knowledge originate? This leads us to an exploration of the potential influence of Gnostic beliefs on the Knights Templar and their alleged worship of Baphomet. While the connection between the Templars and Gnosticism remains speculative, it offers a lens through which we can unlock deeper meanings behind their alleged heresy and the enduring fascination with their secrets. Let's delve into the shadows of history to explore these enigmatic links. To understand the possible Gnostic connections, we must first journey back to the early centuries of the Common Era and explore the history of Gnosticism itself. Gnosticism was not a monolithic religion, but rather a diverse collection of esoteric and philosophical beliefs that flourished in the Roman Empire. These beliefs, often drawing from various philosophical and religious traditions, including Platonism, Zoroastrianism, and Judaism, shared a common thread: the belief that the material world is a flawed creation and that true salvation comes through inner knowledge or gnosis. Over time, the early church actively suppressed Gnosticism, condemning its texts as heretical and persecuting its followers, driving its beliefs underground and into the shadows of esoteric history. The suppression of Gnosticism is critical to understanding any potential link to the Templars. Central to Gnostic cosmology is the concept of Sophia, the divine feminine principle, and it is here that we find a potentially profound link to the figure of Baphomet. In Gnostic tradition, Sophia is the source of divine wisdom and the mother of all creation, a cosmic being whose actions shape the universe. However, Sophia also experienced a fall, resulting in her entrapment within the material world, a symbolic representation of the suppression of the divine feminine in many patriarchal religious systems. Some researchers suggest that Baphomet, with its androgynous form and association with fertility, could be interpreted as a symbol of the restored Sophia, the reconciliation of the divine feminine and masculine principles, something the Church sought to destroy. But can we find concrete examples of Gnostic symbolism echoed in Templar imagery or beliefs? One compelling area of inquiry involves comparing Gnostic depictions of the demiurge, the flawed creator god, with interpretations of Baphomet's goat head. The demiurge is often portrayed as a lion-headed serpent, a monstrous being symbolizing ignorance and control over the material realm. The goat head of Baphomet, while not identical, could be seen as a similar symbol of primal energy and earthly power, perhaps representing the Templars' alleged rejection of the demiurge's authority. Furthermore, the accusations against the Templars included the worship of a bearded head idol, a mysterious artifact that could potentially link to Gnostic images of the divine or representations of ancient wisdom. What then does it signify if the Knights Templar harbored Gnostic beliefs? The Templars, through their extensive travels and interactions with diverse cultures in the Holy Land, were potentially exposed to Gnostic ideas, either directly or indirectly. If the Templars embraced Gnostic beliefs, their alleged worship of Baphomet could have been a way of honoring the suppressed divine feminine, challenging the patriarchal structure of the Church, and seeking a more direct connection with the divine. This interpretation casts the Templars not merely as victims of political persecution, but as spiritual rebels, challenging the established order and guarding a hidden tradition of gnosis and enlightenment, the Johannite heresy. However, we must acknowledge the limitations of the available historical evidence, but this exploration has only begun. The Templars did not limit their travels just to the Holy Lands. During their time in the East, the Templars may have been initiated into other ancient mysteries, further developing their understanding of hidden knowledge and spiritual transformation. Could these mysteries, predating Christianity itself, have influenced their alleged worship of Baphomet. What other secrets did they uncover in the East that remain hidden to this day? It is crucial to acknowledge that definitively proving a direct link between the Templars and Gnosticism presents a significant challenge. The historical records are incomplete, often biased, and open to multiple interpretations. Establishing a direct, demonstrable link between the Templars and Gnostic texts or communities may be impossible to achieve with certainty. Can we truly say that Baphomet had Gnostic origins? Yet, the value of exploring these potential Gnostic connections to the Templars and Baphomet lies not in proving a definitive historical link, but in understanding their enduring mystery and allure. The Templars, rightly or wrongly, have become associated with hidden knowledge, spiritual rebellion, and the suppression of alternative spiritual paths, all themes that resonate deeply with Gnostic beliefs. Ultimately, regardless of the historical accuracy of these connections, they offer valuable insights into the human quest for spiritual meaning and the enduring power of symbols. But perhaps what is most shocking is this. What if the Templars knew that they would be accused of heresy and idolatry, that they would be condemned and burned at the stake? What if their martyrdom was not a tragic accident, but a carefully orchestrated act of defiance, designed to ensure the survival of their secrets and their lasting legacy? The truth, it turns out, may be even more disturbing than we could have imagined. If the truth is more disturbing than we could have imagined, what other ancient mysteries might have shaped the Templars' beliefs and practices? This brings us to the crossroads of faith that was the Holy Land during the Templars' era, a crucible where diverse spiritual traditions met and mingled, potentially influencing the enigmatic order in ways that remain shrouded in secrecy. While venturing further into speculative territory, it's crucial to remember the historical context. The Templars, as a powerful and influential order stationed in the heart of the Levant for nearly 2 centuries, would have inevitably been exposed to a myriad of religious and philosophical currents. Although pinpointing the exact nature and extent of their interaction with these traditions remains a challenge, we can explore the historical plausibility of their exposure and consider the potential impact on their beliefs and practices. Let us now explore these specific ancient mystery traditions and how they might intertwine with Templar practices and symbolism. During the Templars' time, the Levant was a vibrant tapestry of diverse mystery traditions, each with its unique blend of beliefs and practices. This melting pot included Hermeticism, a philosophical and religious tradition attributed to the legendary Hermes Trismegistus, emphasizing esoteric knowledge and spiritual transformation. Kabbalah, a mystical branch of Judaism, also flourished in the region, offering a complex system of symbolism and practices aimed at achieving direct communion with the divine. Beyond these more established traditions, remnants of ancient pagan cults persisted in rural areas, their practices often interwoven with local folklore and religious customs. The Holy Land served as an extraordinary hub for religious syncretism, a process where different beliefs blended together, influencing one another and creating new hybrid forms of spirituality. It is possible that the Templars, navigating this complex landscape, were drawn to elements of these diverse traditions, incorporating them into their own spiritual framework, perhaps as a means of enriching their understanding of the divine or challenging the dogmatic restrictions of the Church. What exactly defined these ancient mystery traditions, and what might have attracted the Knights Templar? A central characteristic was the emphasis on initiation, a process of gradual revelation and transformation through which initiates gained access to secret knowledge and deeper spiritual insights. This secret knowledge was not merely intellectual. It was experiential, attained through ritual, meditation, and personal communion with the divine. Symbolism, ritual, and allegory were used to convey profound spiritual truths, requiring initiates to decode hidden meanings and unlock their transformative power. The concept of the divine feminine, often suppressed in mainstream Christianity, played a prominent role in some mystery traditions, such as the cult of Isis, offering an alternative perspective on the nature of divinity and the path to spiritual wholeness. The potential for pantheistic or polytheistic elements also existed within these traditions, challenging the strict monotheism of the Church and offering a more inclusive view of the cosmos. But what specific examples of these mystery traditions were prevalent in the Holy Land, and what evidence supports their potential influence on the Templars? Consider Sufism, a mystical branch of Islam that emphasized inner experience and direct communion with the divine through practices such as meditation, music, and ecstatic dance. The Templars, through their interactions with Muslim communities, may have been exposed to Sufi teachings, adopting elements of their mystical practices or incorporating Sufi symbolism into their own rituals. Druze communities, with their syncretic religious beliefs, blending elements of Islam, Christianity, and ancient paganism, also flourished in the Levant, and their unique symbolism and esoteric knowledge may have resonated with the Templars' alleged interest in hidden traditions. In rural areas, ancient pagan cults persisted, their practices often intertwined with local Christian practices, such as the veneration of local saints and the use of sacred sites for ritual purposes. Might the Templars have encountered these traditions, adopting elements of their practices or incorporating their symbolism into their own worldview? The Essenes, a Jewish sect predating Christianity, could also have had connections to the Templars. What might have been the significance of these potential connections? Through their interactions with diverse cultures and religions, the Templars may have adopted syncretic beliefs, blending Christian tenets with elements of non-Christian traditions. The alleged worship of Baphomet could be interpreted as incorporating aspects of these mystery traditions into their spiritual practice. The Templars, through the figure of Baphomet, could have been honoring the divine feminine, challenging the patriarchal structure of the Church, and seeking a more direct connection with the divine. This interpretation paints the Templars not just as victims of political persecution, but as spiritual pioneers, challenging the established order and safeguarding a hidden tradition of enlightenment. It suggests that the Templars were not simply heretics, but seekers of a deeper, more inclusive form of spirituality, one that embraced the wisdom of diverse traditions and challenged the limitations of religious dogma. However, we must now turn our attention to specific Templar symbols and rituals in light of these potential connections to ancient mysteries. Consider the Red Cross, the two riders on one horse, and the idol of Baphomet. Could these symbols hold hidden meanings derived from ancient mystery traditions? Did the Templars' rituals incorporate elements of these traditions, offering a new interpretation of their practices and beliefs? However, it is essential to address a critical counterargument. Is there sufficient direct evidence demonstrating that the Templars actively participated in or adopted elements from these mystery traditions? Explicit historical accounts detailing the Templars' interactions with specific mystery cults or their adoption of specific rituals are scarce. Moreover, interpreting the beliefs and practices of a secretive organization based on limited and often biased historical records presents a significant challenge. A direct, demonstrable link between the Templars and specific mystery traditions may be impossible to establish with certainty. However, that does not mean that we can't entertain the idea. Despite the limited direct evidence, exploring potential connections between the Templars and ancient mysteries remains valuable. Even if speculative, it helps us understand their enduring mystery and allure. The Templars, whether accurately or not, have become associated with hidden knowledge, spiritual rebellion, alternative spiritual paths, and the potential for intentional martyrdom. Regardless of the historical accuracy of these connections, they offer valuable insights into the human quest for spiritual meaning and the enduring power of symbols. So what if all of this was by design? What if the Templars knew what they were doing would result in their destruction, but did it anyway? What if they chose to die? What if the Templars were not merely influenced by outside forces, but were driven by an internal code so profound that it dictated their very demise? Having explored the potential influences of Gnostic and mystery traditions on the Knights Templar, we must now turn our attention inward, examining the Order's internal framework, their rules, vows, and ideals. This brings us to the crucial question of how these internal factors might have contributed to a willingness to face persecution and death, hinting at a possible motive for their ultimate sacrifice. To fully understand the Templars' mindset, we must delve into the Templar rule, the comprehensive set of regulations that govern their daily lives. The Templar rule, largely based on the Cistercian order's monastic guidelines, wasn't merely a list of do's and don'ts. It was a blueprint for a life of unwavering devotion and discipline. From the hours of prayer and the strict regulation of meals to the intense military training and the oversight of every aspect of daily life, the rule instilled a sense of order and purpose that transcended the individual. These regulations dictated every aspect of a Templar's existence, creating an environment where obedience, self-sacrifice, and commitment to a higher purpose were not just encouraged, but demanded. Consider the implications of this rigid structure. Was it simply a means of maintaining order, or did it serve to cultivate a specific type of mindset, one that valued the collective over the individual and the spiritual over the material? Consider the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, the cornerstones of the Templar life. These vows, while common in monastic orders, took on a unique significance within the context of a military brotherhood. Poverty meant renouncing personal wealth and possessions, channeling all resources towards the order's mission. Chastity demanded celibacy, redirecting natural desires towards spiritual pursuits and fostering a sense of detachment from earthly pleasures. But perhaps the most significant vow was that of obedience, which required unquestioning submission to the order's leaders. Was this vow simply a means of maintaining discipline in the battlefield, or did it extend to matters of faith and conscience? What if this vow of obedience fostered a culture where questioning authority, even when faced with persecution, was unthinkable? What if the Templars were so deeply ingrained with this value, they willingly went to their deaths rather than disobeying their superiors, even when those superiors may have had ulterior motives? The Templars saw themselves as warrior monks, a unique blend of military prowess and spiritual devotion. The concept of chivalry, with its emphasis on honor, courage, and selfless service, played a significant role in shaping their self-perception. They believed they were fighting a holy war against the enemies of Christianity, defending the sacred lands and protecting pilgrims. But what if this belief extended beyond the physical battlefield? What if the Templars saw themselves as fighting a spiritual war as well, battling against the forces of darkness and defending a hidden truth? The spiritual rewards promised to those who died in battle for the faith further reinforced this mindset. Martyrdom, the ultimate act of self-sacrifice, was seen as a direct path to paradise, ensuring eternal glory and divine favor. Could this belief have fostered a willingness to embrace death, even when faced with false accusations and unjust persecution? While the historical evidence regarding the Templars' inner spiritual lives remains limited, exploring the possibility that some Templars engaged in private meditation or contemplation practices opens a new avenue of inquiry. The potential influence of mystical traditions, such as those previously discussed, on the Templars' spiritual outlook cannot be dismissed. What if some Templars sought a deeper understanding of spiritual truths, engaging in practices that transcended the prescribed rituals of the Church? The Knights Templar would have had access to the same texts that Renaissance alchemists had, texts that could have encouraged the inner self to explore and seek out something greater, something more. Perhaps these inner practices fostered a willingness to transcend earthly concerns, even through death, allowing them to detach from their physical bodies and embrace a higher spiritual destiny. But what if these practices gave them the strength to make the ultimate choice? The Templars' unwavering obedience to their superiors, their belief in a higher cause, and their potential engagement in private spiritual practices are all internal factors that could have influenced their behavior during the trials. Their code of conduct and spiritual beliefs might have led them to follow orders even when facing persecution, remaining silent or confessing to false charges to protect the order's secrets. Their spiritual beliefs may have influenced their acceptance of suffering and death, viewing it as a means of achieving a higher spiritual goal. The complexities of interpreting their actions must be emphasized, acknowledging the potential for both coercion and genuine conviction. But what if the coercion was not the only factor? What if the Templars willingly walked into the trap, knowing that their sacrifice would serve a greater purpose? However, we need to delve further into how the Templars might have strategically used the accusations of heresy to further a hidden agenda, potentially embracing martyrdom as a way to achieve their goals. Accusations against the Templars included denial of Christ, spitting on the cross, and worship of Baphomet. What if the Templars deliberately provoked or embraced these accusations as a form of spiritual rebellion? What if martyrdom was seen as a way to expose the corruption of the Church, to challenge its authority, or to inspire future generations of spiritual seekers? The implications of such a deliberate act are staggering. Could it be that the Templars were not victims, but strategists, using their own demise as a tool to achieve a long-term objective? Before concluding, let us not forget the very real threat of torture and intimidation employed by the Inquisitors. Pointing out the inconsistencies in the Templars' confessions suggests they were influenced by external pressure. The human desire for survival and the potential for even the most devout individuals to succumb to fear cannot be ignored. It is entirely possible that the Templars' actions during their trials were primarily driven by coercion and fear, rather than a conscious desire for martyrdom. But what if coercion and conviction intertwined? What if the Templars' beliefs made them more susceptible to the Inquisitors' tactics, or more willing to endure suffering for a cause they believed in? Despite the very real threat of torture, the weight of evidence suggests that some Templars, particularly their leaders, may have chosen martyrdom as a way to achieve their spiritual goals. The enduring fascination with the Templars stems from their association with unwavering conviction, spiritual rebellion, and the willingness to die for one's beliefs. In the end, the Templars' story challenges us to consider the power of belief and the potential for individuals to choose death over compromising their principles. But what if this choice was not merely an act of defiance, but a calculated move in a much larger game? What if their deaths were not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter in the Templar saga? What if their actions were not just about saving themselves, but about sacrificing themselves for a cause far greater than their own lives? Get ready, because we are about to explore that shocking truth. Building on the idea that some Templars willingly faced death for their beliefs, a startling question emerges. What if this choice was not merely an act of defiance, but a calculated move, a strategic embrace of intentional martyrdom? While seemingly paradoxical, this perspective offers a compelling lens through which to examine the Templars' final actions, reframing their demise not as a defeat, but as a carefully orchestrated sacrifice with far-reaching goals. It is essential to acknowledge the speculative nature of this interpretation, as direct evidence of the Templars' intent is scarce. However, this theory offers a compelling explanation for many historical paradoxes and contradictory reports surrounding their trials. The accusations against the Templars' heresy, idol worship, and denial of Christ are well documented, as is the brutal persecution they faced at the hands of King Philip IV of France and the Inquisitors. But what if the Templars, particularly their leaders, saw these accusations and the ensuing trials as an opportunity, a stage upon which to enact a final, powerful act of defiance? Let's explore the possibility that the Templars deliberately chose martyrdom to achieve specific goals: to expose corruption within the Church, to inspire future generations of spiritual seekers, and to protect the secrets they had sworn to defend, even unto death. To fully grasp the potential significance of intentional martyrdom in the Templar context, we must first understand the historical weight of self-sacrifice and its profound power as a tool. Martyrdom, the act of dying for one's beliefs, holds a central place in Christianity and other religions, serving as a powerful form of spiritual witness. In the early Church, the examples of Jesus and the apostles, who faced persecution and death for their faith, became foundational narratives, inspiring countless others to embrace martyrdom. The willingness of these early Christians to die rather than renounce their beliefs served as a testament to the strength of their faith and a catalyst for the spread of Christianity. But the concept of martyrdom extends beyond Christianity. In Islam, the concept of shaheed refers to a martyr who dies in the cause of Allah, promised paradise for their sacrifice. Similarly, in Judaism, stories of individuals who chose death rather than renounce their faith have served as enduring examples of unwavering devotion. Across these diverse traditions, the common themes of self-sacrifice, unwavering faith, and the pursuit of a higher purpose underscore the profound impact of martyrdom as a spiritual and cultural force. Is it possible that the Templars sought to tap into this very power? But what exactly constitutes intentional martyrdom? How do we distinguish a conscious choice to die for a cause from accidental death or forced suicide? Intentional martyrdom involves a clear understanding of the consequences and a willingness to accept them for a specific purpose. It is not merely about dying for one's beliefs, but about strategically using death as a tool to achieve a desired outcome. This distinguishes intentional martyrdom from other forms of self-sacrifice, such as dying in battle or sacrificing oneself to save others, which may be driven by instinct or duty rather than a deliberate plan. The potential motivations for intentional martyrdom are varied, ranging from a desire to expose corruption and inspire others to achieve spiritual liberation or protect secret knowledge. The key element is agency, a conscious decision to embrace death as a means to an end. Could the Templars have possessed such agency in the face of the Inquisition? Looking at the trial records, we find several instances that could be interpreted as evidence of a deliberate choice to embrace martyrdom. Despite facing torture and intimidation, many Templars refused to confess to false charges, clinging to their vows and their silence. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Templars, famously recanted his initial confession, declaring his innocence and that of the order, even knowing that this defiance would lead to his death. These were not the actions of men simply seeking to survive. Some Templars may have deliberately provoked their persecutors, challenging their authority and exposing their corruption. The symbolism of the Templars' silence is also open to interpretation. Was it merely a sign of fear and submission, or could it have been a form of resistance, a refusal to legitimize the Inquisitors' unjust proceedings? By refusing to cooperate, the Templars may have been attempting to undermine the legitimacy of the trials and expose the corruption of the Church. What if their silence spoke louder than any confession? These actions, seemingly self-destructive, could point to a deeper motive. The Templars may have believed that their deaths would serve as a catalyst, exposing the corruption of the Church and inspiring others to seek spiritual truth outside the confines of established dogma. If the Templars were indeed influenced by Gnostic or mystery school traditions, as we have previously discussed, they may have viewed martyrdom as a way to achieve spiritual liberation, transcending the limitations of the physical world and entering a higher state of consciousness. The act of martyrdom, in this context, becomes a form of spiritual rebellion, a rejection of the established order and an affirmation of a higher truth. Furthermore, it is not beyond the realm of possibility that the Templars had information they wanted to protect at all costs, and martyrdom was the ultimate sacrifice they could make to keep this information secret, and out of the wrong hands. But what would be the potential consequences of the Templars' actions, whether intentional or not? Their story has resonated through the centuries, inspiring countless spiritual seekers, rebels, and artists. Could it be that the Templars' martyrdom served as a catalyst for later spiritual movements, such as the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, who claim a connection to the Templar legacy? Their example continues to inspire those who seek to challenge authority and pursue spiritual truth, even in the face of persecution. But what if their influence extends even further, shaping the course of history in ways we are only beginning to understand? However, it's crucial to address the counterargument that the Templars' actions were primarily driven by political and economic factors, rather than a conscious desire for martyrdom. King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the Templars, stood to gain immense wealth by seizing their assets. The political power struggle between Philip IV and the papacy further fueled the persecution, as Philip sought to assert his authority over the Church. These factors undoubtedly played a significant role in the Templars' downfall, creating a climate of fear and oppression that made resistance extremely difficult. To ignore these political and economic forces would be to paint an incomplete picture of the Templars' demise. Despite these very real political and economic pressures, it remains possible that some Templars, particularly their leaders, may have chosen martyrdom as a way to achieve their spiritual goals, even if those goals were intertwined with earthly concerns. Their unwavering conviction, their willingness to defy authority, and their ultimate sacrifice have cemented their place in history as symbols of spiritual rebellion. The enduring fascination with the Templars stems from this potent combination of unwavering conviction and the willingness to die for one's beliefs. Ultimately, the Templars' story challenges us to consider the power of belief and the potential for individuals to choose death over compromising their principles, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Building upon the idea of intentional martyrdom, the echoes of the Knights Templar resonate through history, their story continuing to inspire spiritual seekers, rebels, and various groups across the ages. While some connections remain speculative, the very real impact of the Templar narrative cannot be denied. Their actions, interpreted as a deliberate sacrifice, have become a potent symbol, influencing movements and individuals long after their demise. But what is it about the Templars' alleged intentional martyrdom that continues to capture the imagination? It is time to explore specific examples of groups who found inspiration in the Templars, both positively and, as we will see, negatively. Among the most prominent are the Freemasons, a fraternal organization that has long claimed a connection to the Knights Templar. Their rituals and symbolism, steeped in esoteric meaning, bear striking resemblances to those attributed to the Templars. Some Masonic orders even incorporate Templar degrees, where members reenact aspects of the Templar story, emphasizing themes of chivalry, honor, and spiritual seeking. But is this connection more than just symbolic? Could the Freemasons be the direct inheritors of Templar secrets, carrying on their mission in a clandestine manner? Then there are the Rosicrucians, a more elusive and esoteric group dedicated to the pursuit of hidden wisdom and the mastery of nature's secrets. They, too, have drawn parallels between their own quest and the Templars' alleged pursuit of forbidden knowledge, suggesting a shared lineage of esoteric understanding. Like the Templars, the Rosicrucians emphasize personal transformation, spiritual enlightenment, and the importance of challenging established dogma. Could the Rosicrucians have been drawn to the Templars' story because of a shared interest in Gnostic or Hermetic traditions, seeing them as fellow initiates on the path to spiritual liberation? Beyond these well-known examples, other groups, such as the Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO, have appropriated Templar imagery and symbolism, weaving them into their own complex systems of ritual and philosophy. These groups often focus on the more occult aspects of the Templar legend, emphasizing the potential for spiritual power and the importance of challenging conventional morality. The common themes that unite these diverse groups are a spirit of spiritual seeking, a sense of rebellion against established authority, and a devotion to achieving a higher purpose, themes that all echo the narrative of the Templars themselves. But what is the underlying appeal of these themes that draws so many diverse groups to the Templar legacy? Perhaps the enduring appeal lies in the power of the archetype. The Templars' intentional martyrdom serves as a compelling example of unwavering conviction and a willingness to sacrifice everything for one's beliefs. Their story resonates with those who feel marginalized, oppressed, or disillusioned with the world around them, offering a potent symbol of resistance and spiritual rebellion. The power of sacrifice, especially self-sacrifice, has always been a powerful motivating force in human history, transcending cultural and religious boundaries. For those who feel disenfranchised, the Templars' story offers a powerful narrative of defiance against injustice and corruption. The willingness to die for a cause can be seen as a way to achieve a kind of immortality, transcending earthly limitations and entering the realm of legend. But is it the promise of immortality or a deeper desire for meaning and purpose that truly motivates individuals to embrace martyrdom, whether literally or figuratively? The psychological and emotional factors that drive individuals to embrace such extreme acts are complex and varied, ranging from a desire to leave a lasting legacy to a profound belief in a higher power or a transcendent truth. Consider, for example, how the Freemasons incorporate Templar symbolism into their rituals and ceremonies. The Knights Templar degree, in particular, serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of courage, loyalty, and spiritual devotion. By reenacting aspects of the Templar story, Freemasons connect with a tradition of unwavering conviction and a willingness to stand up for what they believe in, even in the face of adversity. This connection provides a sense of belonging, purpose, and continuity, linking them to a lineage of spiritual seekers that stretches back centuries. But is the connection based on historical reality or a symbolic construct, a way to add mystique and gravitas to their own rituals? The Rosicrucians, too, have drawn parallels between their quest for esoteric knowledge and the Templars' alleged pursuit of hidden wisdom. They may have been drawn to the Templars' potential connection to ancient mystery traditions, seeing them as fellow initiates on the path to spiritual enlightenment. By associating themselves with the Templars, the Rosicrucians may have sought to legitimize their own claims to esoteric knowledge and to tap into the power of the Templar myth, suggesting that they, too, were part of a secret lineage of spiritual guardians, tasked with protecting ancient truths from the uninitiated. What specific aspects of the Templar narrative resonated with the Rosicrucians, and how did they incorporate these elements into their own beliefs and practices? Various political and religious groups have also used the Templar image to promote their own agendas, both positively and negatively. Some have portrayed the Templars as symbols of Christian virtue, using their story to inspire patriotism and religious fervor. Others have focused on the more rebellious aspects of the Templar legend, casting them as champions of freedom and defenders of the oppressed. Still, others have misappropriated the Templar image for more nefarious purposes, using it to justify violence, intolerance, or the pursuit of power. Templar imagery appears in art, literature, and popular culture, often reflecting a romanticized or idealized view of the Templars as noble warriors and guardians of sacred knowledge. These depictions often emphasize their chivalry, their piety, and their willingness to sacrifice themselves for a higher cause. However, such romanticized portrayals often obscure the complexities and ambiguities of the Templars' actual history, presenting a distorted view of their beliefs, their motivations, and their ultimate fate. So what motivates these diverse groups to adopt the Templar mythos, and what does it signify for them? The Freemasons may see the Templars as a symbol of spiritual enlightenment and self-improvement, drawn to their emphasis on chivalry, honor, and personal transformation. The Rosicrucians may be drawn to the Templars' potential connection to ancient mystery traditions, seeing them as fellow seekers of hidden wisdom and masters of esoteric knowledge. Various political and religious groups may use the Templar image to legitimize their own power or to inspire their followers, portraying themselves as inheritors of the Templars' legacy of virtue, courage, or rebellion. It is essential to consider the specific context in which the Templar narrative is being invoked, understanding the particular beliefs, goals, and motivations of those who are drawn to their story. By analyzing the ways in which different groups have interpreted and appropriated the Templar mythos, we can gain deeper insights into the enduring power of narratives and the complex relationship between history, myth, and identity. But what happens when the line between historical reality and mythological interpretation becomes blurred, and the romanticized image of the Templars obscures the darker aspects of their legacy? This leads us to a discussion of the potential dangers and pitfalls associated with romanticizing the Templars and their story, particularly the risk of misinterpreting their beliefs or using their image to justify harmful actions. There is a potential for extremist groups to misappropriate Templar symbolism for their own purposes. Individuals may be drawn to the Templar narrative for unhealthy or misguided reasons, becoming obsessed with the Templars and losing sight of reality. Is it possible that the romanticized image of the Templars obscures the complexities and ambiguities of their actual history, presenting a distorted view of their beliefs, their motivations, and their ultimate fate? And what happens when this distorted image is used to justify violence, intolerance, or the pursuit of power? Having established the possibility of intentional martyrdom among the Knights Templar, we now turn to a symbol inextricably linked to their downfall: Baphomet. Before us lies a complex and controversial figure, interpreted as a pagan deity, a Gnostic symbol, and even a representation of forbidden knowledge. But what if Baphomet, beyond these interpretations, served as a potent symbol for understanding the Templars' embrace of sacrifice, not as an idol to be worshipped, but as a symbolic representation of their chosen fate? To understand this possibility, we must look at the iconography of Baphomet itself, deciphering the layers of meaning embedded within its image. The androgynous nature of Baphomet, often depicted with both male and female characteristics, is perhaps the first clue. Could this androgyny represent the sacrifice of ego and personal identity, a merging of opposing forces into a unified whole, for the sake of a higher spiritual purpose? The Templars, bound by vows of obedience and poverty, may have seen the suppression of individual desires as a necessary step towards achieving a collective goal, a sacrifice of the self for the good of the order. This sacrifice is no different from the sacrifice Jesus Christ did for humanity. Then there is the goat's head, perhaps the most recognizable and controversial feature of Baphomet. Throughout history, the goat has often been associated with the scapegoat, an animal symbolically burdened with the sins of the community and then sacrificed to purify the collective. Could the Templars have identified with this image, seeing themselves as scapegoats for a corrupt church, willing to bear the weight of accusations and persecution in order to expose the hypocrisy of the religious establishment? Their acceptance of this role, their willingness to be demonized and condemned, could be seen as a form of spiritual sacrifice, a cleansing fire meant to purify the church by their intentional martyrdom. The torch that blazes atop Baphomet's head is yet another piece of this symbolic puzzle. Fire, in many esoteric traditions, represents illumination, spiritual awakening, and the transformative power of knowledge. Could this torch symbolize the spiritual enlightenment that the Templars sought to achieve through their sacrifices, a willingness to embrace death in order to attain a higher state of consciousness? Or perhaps it represents the light of truth that they hoped to ignite in the world, a challenge to the darkness of ignorance and superstition that they believed had consumed the church. Finally, consider the placement of Baphomet's arms, one pointing upwards towards the heavens, the other downwards towards the earth, and the inscriptions Salve and Coagula adorning them. These are alchemical terms representing the process of dissolution and reconstruction, the breaking down of old forms to create something new. Could the Templars have seen their own destruction as a necessary step in the alchemical transformation of society, a sacrifice of the old order to pave the way for a new era of spiritual enlightenment? The Salve representing their sacrifice, the Coagula representing the change in society. This leads us to the potential connection between Baphomet and the concept of surrendering to divine will, interpreting the figure as embodying the acceptance of fate and the willingness to sacrifice oneself for a higher purpose. Could Baphomet, in this context, represent the acceptance of one's destiny, even if that destiny involves suffering, persecution, or death? The Templars, through their vows of obedience to their Grand Master and their unwavering belief in their holy cause, may have cultivated a similar mindset, a willingness to relinquish control and submit to a higher power. Indeed, the paradoxical nature of sacrifice is that, through surrendering oneself, one can achieve a higher form of liberation or enlightenment. The Templars, by willingly facing their accusers and refusing to renounce their beliefs, may have seen their deaths as a form of ultimate liberation, a triumph over earthly limitations, and a transcendence into the realm of the divine. But is this interpretation merely wishful thinking, or can we find parallels in other myths and legends that support this idea? Looking at other figures in mythology, Prometheus sacrificed himself for humanity by stealing fire from the gods, enduring eternal torment as a result. This is no different from the eternal torment of hell the knights were tortured in to extract information. Odin sacrificed himself on the world tree Yggdrasil, hanging for 9 days and nights to gain knowledge of the runes. Quetzalcoatl, the Aztec god, sacrificed himself to create humanity, offering his own blood to give life to the new race. These figures, like the Templars, embraced sacrifice as a means of achieving a greater good, of benefiting future generations through their own suffering. Could the Templars have seen themselves in a similar light, as willing participants in a cosmic drama, their deaths serving a purpose beyond their own individual lives? But perhaps the most compelling aspect of this interpretation is the idea of sacrifice as a form of spiritual rebellion. Considering this, Baphomet can be seen as a symbol of spiritual rebellion. The Templars might have seen their choice of martyrdom as a way to defy the corrupt church and reclaim a more authentic form of spirituality. Through their alleged heretical beliefs and practices, the Templars were already challenging the authority of the church, questioning its doctrines and rejecting its control over their spiritual lives. Their martyrdom, in this context, could be seen as the ultimate act of defiance, a refusal to submit to a corrupt and oppressive institution. Perhaps they saw their deaths as a way to expose the church's corruption, to reveal the hypocrisy and greed that had infiltrated its ranks. Their sacrifice, in this light, becomes a powerful statement, inspiring others to question the church's authority and to seek a more genuine connection with the divine. It is possible that their actions, born of secret heretical rituals, can be interpreted as a form of spiritual warfare, using sacrifice as a weapon against oppression, a way to undermine the church's power and reclaim spiritual freedom for themselves and others. As we consider this, it is natural to ask, what specific rituals or practices might the Templars have used to prepare themselves for such a profound act of sacrifice? What inner pathways might they have explored to detach themselves from earthly concerns and embrace the prospect of death with such conviction? Perhaps they engaged in intensive meditation, rigorous contemplation, or other forms of inner seeking, drawing upon Gnostic or mystery traditions to cultivate a sense of spiritual detachment and acceptance. But is there any concrete evidence to support such speculation? Herein lies the interpretational challenge. It is impossible to ignore the reality that these interpretations of Baphomet are, to a degree, speculative. there is a limitation of historical support. Therefore, it is important to distinguish between symbolic interpretations and historical facts. While we can analyze the symbolism of Baphomet and draw parallels to other myths and legends, we must acknowledge the challenges of reconstructing the beliefs and practices of the Templars with certainty. That being said, it is equally important to avoid anachronistic interpretations and resist imposing modern ideas and values onto a medieval context. A direct, demonstrable link between the Templars' alleged intentional martyrdom and their worship of Baphomet as a symbol of sacrifice may be impossible to establish with absolute certainty. And yet, does this mean that exploring these symbolic connections is without value? Ultimately, the enduring mystery and allure of the Templars stems from their association with these powerful symbols, their willingness to embrace martyrdom for a higher purpose, and their unwavering defiance in the face of persecution. The Templars' story, whether based on historical fact or embellished by myth and legend, challenges us to consider the power of symbols to shape our beliefs and actions, to inspire us to make difficult choices in pursuit of our own spiritual goals. As we prepare to consider the specific rituals potentially used by the Templars, keep in mind that maybe we haven't understood the Templars at all. Having explored the potential for Baphomet to symbolize the Templars' embrace of sacrifice, we now turn to a more intimate question. What specific rituals or practices might they have employed to prepare themselves mentally and spiritually for intentional martyrdom? We embark into the Templars' inner sanctum, exploring rituals for the end times, rituals that made death not just a possibility, but a rational, even desirable, outcome. It is crucial to acknowledge the speculative nature of reconstructing Templar rituals. The historical record is fragmented, often filtered through the biased accounts of their persecutors. However, as previously discussed, their potential exposure to Gnostic and mystery traditions opens a door to understanding potential ritual practices that align with intentional self-sacrifice. Perhaps, by examining these rituals, we can gain insight into the Templars' mindset and motivations. To understand this possibility, we must first delve into the historical overview of ascetic practices and death rituals in various religious traditions. Asceticism, the practice of severe self-discipline and abstention from worldly pleasures, has long been a path to spiritual purification and detachment from earthly attachments. These practices, employed across diverse cultures, sought to diminish the fear of death by minimizing the value of mortal existence. In early Christianity, asceticism took various forms, including fasting, self-denial, and withdrawal from the world. Monks and hermits sought to emulate the suffering of Christ, believing that through physical and mental discipline, they could achieve a closer union with God. These practices were not merely about enduring hardship. They were about transforming the soul, preparing it for the ultimate transition into the afterlife. But this isn't unique to Christianity. Consider the death rituals of ancient Egypt, where mummification and elaborate funerary ceremonies were designed to ensure the deceased's successful passage into the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that preserving the body and providing the soul with sustenance and guidance would guarantee eternal life. These rituals, steeped in symbolism and mythology, served as a bridge between the mortal and immortal realms, a testament to the enduring power of belief in the face of death. Similar practices can be found in other religions. In Hinduism and Buddhism, detachment from worldly desires is a central tenet, with practices like meditation and yoga aimed at achieving a state of enlightenment and liberation from the cycle of rebirth. Asceticism of these kind are not unique to any one place, with themes of detachment and spiritual preparation being common across all examples. Asceticism wasn't the only concept that helped them. Another important tradition is the emerald tablet, which contains the Hermetic maxim, that which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below. This ancient wisdom, often attributed to the legendary Hermes Trismegistus, speaks of a profound connection between the earthly and the divine, the microcosm and the macrocosm. Could the Templars, steeped in esoteric knowledge, have seen their intentional martyrdom as a reflection of this principle, a sacrifice on earth mirroring a greater cosmic event? This leads us to the concept of memento mori, remember you must die. It is a potent reminder of our mortality. This practice, with its roots in ancient Rome and its adoption by Christian monks, encouraged individuals to contemplate their own death as a means of fostering humility, spiritual focus, and acceptance of one's mortality. By confronting the inevitability of death, individuals could prioritize spiritual values and live more authentically. Memento mori served as a constant reminder that earthly pursuits were fleeting and that true fulfillment lay in the realm of the spirit. The origins of memento mori can be traced back to ancient Rome, where victorious generals were paraded through the streets in triumph. Behind them, a slave would whisper, "Memento mori," reminding them that their victory was temporary and that death awaited them all. This practice, intended to temper pride and promote humility, eventually found its way into Christian monasticism, where it became a central element of spiritual discipline. Christian monks often kept skulls or other reminders of death in their cells, using them as objects of contemplation. These objects served as a constant reminder of the transience of life and the importance of focusing on eternal values. The contemplation of death helped monks to detach from worldly desires and to cultivate a sense of spiritual urgency. This helped in the acceptance of death, making intentional martyrdom a more palatable option, further reducing any fear of death. In this context, the Templars may have used memento mori to reduce their fear of death and to make intentional martyrdom a more palatable option. By constantly contemplating their own mortality, they could have cultivated a mindset of detachment and acceptance, making the prospect of death less daunting. This, however, couldn't have been the only form of meditation. Consider the concrete examples of contemplative practices, such as meditation, prayer, and visualization, that the Templars might have used to prepare themselves for martyrdom. Drawing on Gnostic themes and Eastern traditions previously discussed, these practices could have helped them to cultivate a sense of inner peace, spiritual strength, and unwavering conviction in the face of death. But what specific techniques might they have employed? The Templars may have engaged in Christian forms of meditation, such as centering prayer or lectio divina. Centering prayer involves focusing on a sacred word or phrase, quieting the mind, and opening oneself to divine presence. Lectio divina, on the other hand, involves reading and reflecting on scripture, allowing the words to penetrate the heart and mind. These practices could have helped the Templars to cultivate a deeper connection with God and to find solace in the face of adversity. It is also possible that the Templars were influenced by Eastern meditation techniques, such as mindfulness or vipassana. Mindfulness involves paying attention to the present moment without judgment, while vipassana involves observing the breath and body sensations to gain insight into the nature of reality. These techniques could have helped the Templars to cultivate a sense of detachment from their thoughts and emotions, allowing them to face death with equanimity. Visualization practices could have played a role. Perhaps the Templars used visualization practices to help them to mentally rehearse their final moments and to embrace the prospect of death with courage and conviction. By vividly imagining their own martyrdom, they could have desensitized themselves to the fear of death and strengthened their resolve to remain true to their beliefs. They didn't stop at meditation either. This leads us to the significance of specific rituals or ceremonies that the Templars might have performed to symbolize their commitment to sacrifice. Drawing connections to Baphomet and Gnostic mystery traditions, these rituals could have reinforced their beliefs and prepared them for intentional martyrdom. What forms might these rituals have taken? It's possible the Templars might have reenacted biblical scenes of sacrifice, such as the sacrifice of Isaac by Abraham or the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. By symbolically reliving these events, they could have deepened their understanding of the meaning of sacrifice and strengthened their commitment to a higher cause. But it is more likely they participated in smaller rituals. Perhaps they engaged in symbolic rituals involving the renunciation of worldly possessions or the acceptance of suffering. These rituals could have involved giving away their valuables, fasting for extended periods, or undergoing physical trials. By symbolically sacrificing their earthly comforts, they could have reinforced their detachment from worldly desires and prepared themselves for the ultimate sacrifice of their lives. The potential for these rituals to have reinforced their commitment to a higher cause and to have prepared them for intentional martyrdom is significant. By participating in these symbolic acts of sacrifice, the Templars could have cultivated a sense of spiritual purpose and strengthened their resolve to face death with courage and conviction. But how did they come to terms with it? This brings us to the alchemical symbolism of transformation through sacrifice, connecting to the Salve et Coagula inscription on Baphomet. Perhaps the Templars saw their deaths as a form of spiritual transmutation. Like the alchemist transforming base metals into gold, they could have believed their sacrifice would purify them, achieving a higher state of consciousness. Did the Salve et Coagula inscription on Baphomet represent this alchemical process of sacrifice and rebirth? What other secrets did the Templars manage to hide from the Church, and what implications does that have for us in the present? However, we must address the counterargument that it's impossible to know for certain what specific rituals or practices the Templars engaged in. The limited historical evidence and the speculative nature of many interpretations require us to exercise caution. Can we truly claim to know the inner spiritual lives of these men? There is a lack of explicit historical accounts detailing the Templars' inner spiritual lives or their engagement in specific rituals. Reconstructing the beliefs and practices of a secretive organization based on incomplete and often biased historical records is a difficult, perhaps impossible, task. Can we truly trust the accounts of their persecutors? A direct, demonstrable link between the Templars' intentional martyrdom and their engagement in specific rituals may be impossible to establish with certainty. The Templars themselves left no explicit record of their inner practices. So, is this entire line of inquiry fruitless? Ultimately, the value of exploring these potential ritualistic connections, even if speculative, lies in understanding the Templars' potential embrace of intentional martyrdom. The power of belief and the potential for individuals to choose death over compromising their principles should not be underestimated. What drives a man to choose death? Synthesizing the information presented, we can see the key themes and arguments related to the potential for rituals to mentally prepare someone for death. The enduring fascination with the Templars stems from their association with unwavering conviction, spiritual rebellion, and the willingness to die for one's beliefs. However, are there other factors at play? The Templars' story challenges us to consider the power of belief and the potential for individuals to choose death over compromising their principles, further solidifying the plot twist of intentional martyrdom. By understanding the power of ritual, do we understand the secret of their resolve? This deeper look is far from over. Having explored the potential for specific rituals to mentally prepare the Templars for death, we now turn to a symbolic framework that may have shaped their understanding of sacrifice: alchemical transformation. Acknowledging the intentional martyrdom plot twist and Baphomet's possible symbolism of it, we shall now examine alchemical symbolism, suggesting a potential Gnostic influence on the Templars' mindset. To understand this symbolic connection, we must first explore the historical origins of alchemy itself. Its roots can be traced back to ancient Egypt and Greece, where alchemists sought to understand the hidden laws of nature and to manipulate matter through a combination of practical experimentation and esoteric philosophy. Alchemy subsequently developed in the Islamic world, where scholars like Jabir ibn Hayyan made significant contributions to its theory and practice. It then spread to Europe during the Middle Ages, where it became associated with the pursuit of the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. The core principles of alchemy revolved around the belief in the transmutation of base metals into gold and the pursuit of spiritual perfection. Alchemists believed that all matter was composed of varying proportions of the four elements: fire, water, earth, and air, and that by manipulating these elements, they could transform one substance into another. However, alchemy was not merely a practical science. It was also a spiritual discipline, with alchemists believing that the transformation of matter was a metaphor for the transformation of the soul. The alchemical process was seen as a series of stages, each with its own symbolic meaning. These stages typically included nigredo, blackening, albedo, whitening, and rubedo, reddening, representing death, purification, and rebirth, respectively. The alchemist sought to guide matter and his own soul through these stages to achieve a state of perfection. This transformative path was often described in cryptic and allegorical language, making it accessible only to those initiated into the secrets of the alchemical art. Key to the alchemical process was the philosopher's stone, a legendary substance believed to be capable of transmuting base metals into gold and granting immortality. The philosopher's stone was not merely a physical substance, however. It was also a symbol of spiritual enlightenment, representing the culmination of the alchemical process and the achievement of a higher state of consciousness. The pursuit of the philosopher's stone was therefore both a practical and a spiritual quest, aimed at transforming both matter and the soul. Another essential concept in alchemy was solve et coagula, Latin for dissolve and coagulate. This phrase represented the alchemical process of breaking down existing structures and rebuilding them in a new and improved form. Solve et coagula was not merely a practical technique, however. It was also a metaphor for the process of spiritual transformation, representing the need to dismantle old beliefs and habits in order to create a new and more enlightened self. It's a maxim deeply embedded in Hermetic philosophy, a philosophy which influenced many secret societies and orders, including, potentially, the Knights Templar. The three stages of the alchemical process, nigredo, albedo, and rubedo, each held profound symbolic significance. Nigredo, the blackening stage, represented death and decay, the breaking down of old structures, and the confrontation with one's own shadow. Albedo, the whitening stage, represented purification and cleansing, the removal of impurities, and the preparation for rebirth. Rubedo, the reddening stage, represented rebirth and enlightenment, the achievement of a higher state of consciousness and the integration of all aspects of the self. But how did alchemists view death and sacrifice as part of this transformation? Alchemists viewed death and sacrifice as essential components of the transformation process, often describing the death of the ego as a necessary step towards spiritual enlightenment. The ego, with its attachments to worldly desires and its fear of the unknown, was seen as an obstacle to spiritual progress. Only by confronting and overcoming the ego could the alchemist achieve true transformation. One must die to be reborn, as the saying goes. The symbolism of the phoenix, a mythical bird that is reborn from ashes, was frequently used to represent the alchemical process of transformation. The phoenix's fiery death represented the breaking down of old structures and the release of pent-up energy, while its rebirth represented the emergence of a new and improved self, purified and strengthened by the ordeal. Could the Templars have seen their own sacrifice in this light? Alchemists also viewed the transmutation of base metals into gold as a metaphor for the transformation of the soul. Base metals, with their impurities and imperfections, represented the unrefined aspects of the self, while gold, with its purity and incorruptibility, represented the perfected soul. By transmuting base metals into gold, the alchemist was symbolically transmuting his own soul, moving from a state of imperfection to a state of perfection. Considering these connections, What if the Templars, through their belief in a higher cause and their willingness to sacrifice themselves, were seeking to transform themselves and the world around them? Perhaps they saw their deaths as a way to purify themselves from sin and to achieve a higher state of consciousness, a path towards gnosis. It's possible they analyzed their potential actions as a form of spiritual alchemy, transmuting their physical existence into a lasting legacy. The intentional martyrdom plot twist adds another layer to this interpretation, suggesting that they actively embraced this alchemical process, consciously choosing death to achieve spiritual transformation. Now, consider the possibility that the Templars used alchemical symbols in their architecture or rituals. Perhaps the layout of their chapels or the design of their banners incorporated alchemical symbols, conveying hidden messages to those who understood their meaning. It's even conceivable that they deliberately chose certain actions to convey alchemical messages to future generations, leaving clues for those who were capable of deciphering them. These coded messages may have been intended to inspire others to seek spiritual transformation and enlightenment, perpetuating their legacy through the ages. However, not everyone agrees with this interpretation. It's important to acknowledge the limitations of the historical evidence and the challenges of reconstructing the beliefs and practices of the Templars. It's also important to avoid anachronistic interpretations and imposing modern ideas onto a medieval context. Indeed, a direct, demonstrable link between the Templars' intentional martyrdom and their knowledge or practice of alchemy may be impossible to establish with certainty. Despite these challenges, the value of exploring these potential alchemical connections, even if speculative, lies in understanding the Templars' enduring mystery and allure. Synthesizing the information presented, we can see the key themes and arguments related to the potential for alchemical symbolism to inform and shape one's path. The enduring fascination with the Templars stems from their association with spiritual rebellion and the willingness to die for one's beliefs, perhaps fueled by a vision of alchemic transformation. It is this possibility that the Templars' story challenges us to consider the power of belief and the potential for individuals to choose death over compromising their principles, perhaps seeking to transform themselves into legends through sacrifice. But what specific alchemical symbols or practices might the Templars have used to encode their beliefs and intentions into their actions? What other secrets lie hidden within their symbols, waiting to be uncovered? Having explored alchemical symbolism and the potential for the Templars to view their sacrifice through this lens, let us now turn to a perhaps more profound influence: the possibility that the Templars saw themselves as active agents in restoring cosmic balance, consciously seeking to restore the divine feminine by embracing intentional martyrdom, a belief rooted in Gnostic principles. This is a concept that could challenge much of what we believe we know about this secretive order. Considering our earlier discussion of Gnostic influence, alchemical symbolism, and the intentional martyrdom plot twist, it's time to examine whether the Templars' motivations stemmed from a desire to correct a perceived cosmic imbalance, specifically related to the suppression of the divine feminine. But how did this play out, and what evidence supports this radical interpretation? To understand this potential motivation, we must first examine the veneration and often suppression of the divine feminine in various religious traditions throughout history. In many ancient pagan religions, female deities were revered as symbols of fertility, creation, and wisdom. Consider the Egyptian goddess Isis, the Greek goddess Gaia, and the Roman goddess Ceres, each embodying essential aspects of life and nature. These goddesses were often central to religious practices, with temples and rituals dedicated to their worship. However, with the rise of patriarchal religious traditions, such as Judaism and Christianity, the divine feminine was often suppressed or relegated to a subordinate role. In these traditions, the focus shifted to a singular male god, with female figures often portrayed as secondary or even as sources of temptation and sin. Think of Eve in the Garden of Eden, whose actions led to humanity's expulsion. This suppression of the feminine, some believe, created a cosmic imbalance that resulted in suffering and discord in the world. This is where the concept of cosmic balance becomes crucial, with the belief that the suppression of the feminine leads to imbalance and suffering. This background is highly relevant to the Templars' potential Gnostic beliefs and the accusations against them, specifically the alleged worship of a bearded head. Could this head have been a symbolic representation of the divine feminine, a deity suppressed by the patriarchal church? Is it possible that the Templars were attempting to restore balance to a world they saw as spiritually and morally corrupt? Now, let us define the concept of cosmic Sophia and its significance in Gnostic cosmology. In Gnostic thought, Sophia is the source of divine wisdom, the mother of all creation, and the embodiment of the divine feminine. But how does she differ from other traditions with a divine feminine, and why would her suppression be considered so critical? Sophia's role in Gnostic cosmology is paramount. She is the wellspring of divine wisdom and the progenitress of all creation. Unlike the distant, unknowable God of some religious traditions, Sophia is actively involved in the creation and evolution of the cosmos. However, Gnostic texts describe a fall of Sophia, in which she emanates from the divine pleroma, fullness, and becomes trapped in the material world, symbolizing the suppression of the divine feminine, which led to the creation of an imperfect reality. This fall resulted in an imperfect creation, a world filled with suffering and ignorance. But Gnostics believed that humans could act as agents of Sophia's restoration through gnosis, or inner knowledge and righteous action. This hints at a Gnostic interpretation of the Templars' actions, suggesting that they saw themselves as instruments of Sophia's return to cosmic balance. It's also critical to understand that Gnosticism and the veneration of the divine feminine would be viewed as heresy by the Catholic Church, which could explain, in part, their brutal persecution. Are there other examples of movements that sought to elevate the divine feminine? Let us consider examples of Gnostic texts and traditions that emphasize the importance of restoring the divine feminine, along with historical examples of groups or individuals who sought to challenge patriarchal religious structures or promote female deities, and what connections, if any, we can draw between them and the Templars. Certain Gnostic texts describe the reunification of Sophia with the divine pleroma, fullness, the restoration of cosmic balance. The Gospel of Mary, for example, portrays Mary Magdalene as a key disciple of Jesus and a recipient of secret teachings not given to the other apostles, potentially casting her as a symbol of the restored divine feminine. These texts often highlight the importance of recognizing and honoring the feminine aspect of the divine, challenging the patriarchal structures of mainstream Christianity. Historically, there have been numerous groups and individuals who sought to challenge patriarchal religious structures or to promote the veneration of female deities. The Cathars, for example, a religious sect that flourished in southern France during the Middle Ages, venerated a female figure known as the Holy Spirit, whom they associated with wisdom and divine grace. Further back, the worship of Cybele in ancient Rome involved ecstatic rituals and the veneration of a powerful mother goddess. Drawing parallels between these examples and the Templars, is it possible they saw themselves as similar agents of change, especially since they were viewed as heretical by the Church? Did they see themselves as part of a larger movement to restore the divine feminine? Given what we have now explored, we can now analyze the significance of the potential connection between the Templars and the restoration of the divine feminine. Their intentional martyrdom can be reframed as a sacrifice to correct a cosmic imbalance and return balance to the world. So, what do their actions and beliefs suggest when viewed through the lens of restoring cosmic balance? It's conceivable that the Templars, through their potential exposure to Gnostic beliefs, may have seen themselves as agents of Sophia's restoration. Their alleged heresy could be interpreted as a rejection of a patriarchal religious order and an embrace of a more balanced spiritual path, one that acknowledged and honored the feminine aspect of the divine. The implications of this interpretation are profound. Understanding their motivations and their lasting legacy, we can see that even in death they became symbols for future generations, beacons of defiance against religious oppression and champions of spiritual freedom. Could this sacred mission be deliberately coded into Templar symbols and architecture? It's possible they intended to signal their purpose to future generations and continue their work even in death, perhaps by encoding their mission to restore cosmic balance through the feminine divine within symbols. Consider specific Templar symbols, such as the rose, the labyrinth, and the Baphomet idol. These symbols may have held hidden meanings related to the restoration of the divine feminine and the pursuit of cosmic balance. Perhaps their architecture was designed to reflect these esoteric beliefs, with sacred geometry and hidden chambers revealing the esoteric program. But what are the specific codes, and how might we decipher them? However, it's essential to address the counterargument that the evidence connecting the Templars to the restoration of Sophia is circumstantial and speculative, emphasizing the importance of avoiding unsupported claims. Acknowledging the lack of explicit historical evidence directly linking the Templars to the restoration of Sophia or similar specific beliefs is crucial. There are significant challenges in interpreting medieval actions through a modern, Gnostic lens. Reconstructing the beliefs and motivations of individuals who lived centuries ago is inherently difficult, and we must be cautious about imposing our own interpretations onto their actions. However, even without definitive proof, the theory can offer a compelling framework for understanding the Templars' alleged heresy and potential motivations, emphasizing the circumstantial nature of the theory. Despite these challenges, the central idea remains. The Templars may have seen themselves as agents of cosmic balance, willing to sacrifice themselves to restore the divine feminine. Synthesizing the information presented, we can highlight the key themes and arguments related to the potential for Gnostic beliefs and the concept of cosmic balance to influence the Templars' actions. The enduring fascination with the Templars stems from their association with spiritual rebellion and their potential restoration of cosmic balance. The Templars' story challenges us to consider the human desire for meaning and our willingness to make sacrifices to achieve it, which potentially drove the Templars to their intentional martyrdom and cemented their name in history. But what specific symbols and architectural designs might the Templars have employed to encode this mission? What hidden meanings lie within the rose, the labyrinth, and the Baphomet idol? Having explored the Templars' potential motivations through the lens of Gnostic beliefs, cosmic balance, and the restoration of the divine feminine, we must now consider another, perhaps more challenging, aspect of their story. While the concept of cosmic balance offers a framework, how did the Templars reconcile intentional self-destruction with Christian doctrine? Introducing redemptive sacrifice as a potential key to understanding their actions, we now must frame their potential suicides as a form of atonement. Acknowledging our prior exploration of Gnostic influences and cosmic restoration, we must also briefly recap the intentional martyrdom plot twist and the inherent Christian condemnation of suicide. It may seem a contradiction that they embraced intentional martyrdom, yet were devout Christians. Here we arrive at a crossroads of belief and action. Thus, it is our intention now to examine the concept of redemptive suicide or altruistic suicide and its potential relevance to the Templars' actions, perhaps resolving this apparent doctrinal paradox. Before we can understand how the Templars might have viewed their deaths as a redemptive act, we need to understand the historical context. Provide a concise historical overview of Christian views on suicide, highlighting its condemnation as a sin against God, while also noting exceptions and nuances in specific cases. What made suicide such an anathema within the Christian faith? The traditional Christian condemnation of suicide stems from its perceived violation of God's will and a rejection of his gift of life. Suicide was viewed as an act of despair, a lack of faith in God's ability to provide solace and salvation. The intentional termination of one's own life was considered a direct defiance of divine authority, an assertion of individual will over God's plan. Theological arguments against suicide often cite biblical passages such as the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," interpreting it as a prohibition against self-murder as well as the taking of another's life. Church teachings reinforce this view, emphasizing the sanctity of life and the belief that only God has the right to determine when a life should end. St. Augustine, for instance, condemned suicide as a detestable and damnable wickedness, arguing that it deprived a person of the opportunity to repent and receive God's forgiveness. However, it's important to acknowledge that throughout history, there have been instances where self-sacrifice was viewed in a more positive light, such as dying to protect others or to defend the faith. The stories of Christian martyrs who faced torture and death rather than renounce their beliefs were often celebrated as examples of heroic self-sacrifice. Dying for one's faith, even if it meant embracing death, was seen as an act of ultimate devotion, setting the stage for a nuanced discussion of redemptive suicide. The idea of sacrificing oneself for the faith has always held a special place within the belief system. The Church's doctrine on suicide and its treatment in canon law evolved over time. Initially, there was no formal prohibition against suicide, but as Christian theology developed, the condemnation of self-killing became more pronounced. By the Middle Ages, canon law prescribed severe penalties for those who committed suicide, including denial of Christian burial and confiscation of property. However, these penalties were not always consistently applied, and there were often exceptions made in cases of insanity or extreme duress. Was there an insanity or duress we haven't considered? Given this understanding, let us now explore what redemptive suicide truly means. Define redemptive suicide or altruistic suicide, differentiating it from individualistic suicide and emphasizing its perceived benefits for the greater good or the restoration of social order, resolving the conflict of self-harm. How does one separate sacrificing oneself for the greater good and simple suicide? Redemptive suicide involves sacrificing oneself for a higher cause or to benefit others. This is not an act of despair or hopelessness, but rather a calculated decision to give one's life for the sake of something greater than oneself. It is often seen as a way to achieve a specific goal, such as protecting a community, restoring social order, or atoning for past sins. The person engaging in redemptive suicide believes that their death will have a positive impact on the world, even if it means sacrificing their own life. Contrast this with individualistic suicide, which is typically motivated by despair, mental illness, or a desire to escape suffering. Individualistic suicide is often seen as a personal tragedy, an act of desperation driven by unbearable pain. The person who commits individualistic suicide is primarily focused on ending their own suffering, rather than on achieving a greater good or benefiting others. The key difference lies in the intent and the perceived outcome. Sociological or philosophical theories, such as those developed by Emile Durkheim, help explain how self-destruction can be seen as a way to achieve a greater good or to restore social order. Durkheim argued that suicide rates are influenced by social factors, such as the degree of social integration and regulation. In some cases, he suggested, suicide can be a form of altruism, where individuals sacrifice themselves for the sake of the group. This provides a theoretical framework for understanding how self-destruction can be seen as a positive act, even if it seems paradoxical. Does this framework help us understand the motivations of the Templars? It's also important to mention that redemptive suicide can be influenced by religious or cultural beliefs. In some religions, martyrdom is seen as the ultimate act of devotion, a way to demonstrate unwavering faith and to attain spiritual reward. In other cultures, self-sacrifice is seen as a way to honor one's ancestors or to protect one's community. These beliefs can shape the way individuals perceive their own lives and deaths, and can make the idea of redemptive suicide more appealing. Was this martyrdom a component of Templar belief? Now that we've defined redemptive suicide, let's look at some historical examples. Provide concrete examples of historical or mythological figures who engaged in redemptive suicide, emphasizing their motivations, the perceived benefits of their actions, and their perceived impact. Do these examples offer a lens through which we can better understand the actions of the Templars? Consider the Roman consul Marcus Curtius, who, according to legend, sacrificed himself to close a chasm that opened in the Roman Forum. The soothsayers declared that Rome's greatest strength must be thrown into the chasm to appease the gods. Curtius, believing that Rome's greatest strength was its military prowess and the courage of its citizens, donned his armor, mounted his horse, and plunged into the abyss. His act was seen as a selfless sacrifice that saved the city from destruction. Explore the story of Iphigenia, who, in Greek mythology, was sacrificed to appease the goddess Artemis and ensure a successful voyage for the Greek fleet to Troy. Iphigenia's sacrifice was initially met with resistance, but she ultimately accepted her fate, recognizing that her death was necessary for the greater good of her people. Her selflessness allowed the Greek army to sail to Troy and eventually win the Trojan War. Did the Templars see themselves as analogous to Iphigenia? Analyze the symbolism of the Norse god Odin, who sacrificed himself on the world tree Yggdrasil to gain knowledge of the runes. Odin hung himself from the tree for 9 days and nights, pierced by his own spear, in order to obtain the wisdom and power of the runes. His self-sacrifice was seen as an act of ultimate devotion to knowledge, a willingness to endure pain and suffering for the sake of enlightenment. This allowed him to become the master of the runes, giving him access to immense power and wisdom. Drawing connections between these figures and the Templars, it is possible that they saw themselves as similar agents of change who were taking the ultimate step. Did they see their actions as a necessary sacrifice to achieve a greater goal, whether it was restoring cosmic balance, protecting secret knowledge, or purifying the church? These figures provide a historical basis for the concept of redemptive action. Given these examples, we can now analyze the Templars' potential actions. Analyze the significance of redemptive suicide in the context of the Templars, suggesting they might have seen their deaths as a way to atone for the sins of the Church, to protect secret knowledge, or to inspire future generations, emphasizing how their actions could be interpreted. How do we interpret actions taken so long ago with limited information? The Templars, through their belief in a higher cause and their willingness to sacrifice themselves, may have been seeking to purify the Church from corruption. They might have witnessed the decadence and greed within the Church hierarchy and believed that their deaths could serve as a catalyst for reform. By embracing martyrdom, they could have hoped to expose the hypocrisy and corruption that they saw as undermining the Church's spiritual authority. Explore the possibility that they saw their deaths as a way to protect secret knowledge from falling into the wrong hands. Perhaps they possessed esoteric wisdom or secret teachings that they believed would be dangerous if revealed to those who were not ready for them. By sacrificing themselves, they could have hoped to safeguard this knowledge and ensure that it would only be passed on to worthy successors. Was this a part of their goal in the end? Analyze the potential for their actions to be interpreted as a form of spiritual warfare, using sacrifice as a weapon against oppression. They may have seen themselves as soldiers of God, engaged in a battle against the forces of darkness. By embracing death, they could have hoped to strike a blow against their enemies and to inspire others to resist tyranny and injustice. Their deaths could have been seen as a form of defiance, a way to challenge the authority of those who sought to suppress their beliefs. Consider their potential as sin eaters, who absorb the sins of their community to set them free in light of their potential embrace of sinful beliefs. Perhaps they willingly took on the burden of the church's sins, hoping to cleanse the world and pave the way for a new spiritual order. In what other ways were the Templars sin eaters? This raises the question of whether the Templars saw themselves as sin eaters, taking on the sins of others to purify the world. Transition to the next section by framing them as deliberately shouldering blame. What can this tell us of their motivations? The historical practice of sin eating in various cultures involved individuals who would ritually consume the sins of a deceased person, thereby freeing their soul from purgatory. These sin eaters were often marginalized members of society who were willing to take on the burden of another's transgressions. This was a literal consumption of the sins of the deceased in order to free them, hinting at the possibility that the Templars deliberately embraced the accusations of heresy as a way to absorb the sins of the Church. They may have seen themselves as similar to these sin eaters, willingly taking on the burden of the Church's sins in order to purify it from within. Their martyrdom may have been seen as a way to cleanse the world and to pave the way for a new spiritual order. Suggesting their martyrdom may have been seen as a way to cleanse the world and to pave the way for a new spiritual order. They were, in a way, destroying the old to make way for the new. But can we truly ascribe these intentions to them, given our modern understanding of sacrifice and religion? It's essential to address the counterargument that it's problematic to apply modern concepts of redemptive suicide to a medieval context. Acknowledge the potential for misinterpreting historical actions and for imposing modern values onto a different time period. Can we impose our modern views on the beliefs of people from the past, acknowledging the limitations of historical evidence and the challenges of reconstructing the beliefs and motivations of the Templars? Reconstructing the beliefs and motivations of individuals who lived centuries ago is inherently difficult, and we must be cautious about imposing our own interpretations onto their actions. Emphasizing the importance of avoiding anachronistic interpretations and imposing modern ideas onto a medieval context. The cultural and religious landscape of the Middle Ages was vastly different from our own, and we must be careful not to assume that people in the past thought and acted in the same way that we do today. Imposing our current beliefs on their long-ago beliefs may not tell the truth. Conceding that a direct, demonstrable link between the Templars' intentional martyrdom and their embrace of redemptive suicide may be impossible to establish with certainty. The evidence connecting the Templars to the concept of redemptive suicide is largely circumstantial and speculative, and it's unlikely that we will ever be able to prove definitively that they consciously embraced this idea. However, this line of thought does show us the possibilities. Despite these challenges, we must reaffirm the value of exploring the potential connection between the Templars and redemptive suicide, even if speculative. Reaffirming the value as a way of understanding their willingness to embrace intentional martyrdom and to challenge the established order. Exploring potential connections furthers our understanding and brings us closer to the truth. Synthesizing the information presented, we can highlight the key themes and arguments related to the potential for redemptive suicide to influence the Templars' actions. The Templars, through their potential belief in the higher cause and their willingness to sacrifice themselves, may have sought to purify the Church from corruption. Thus, the enduring fascination with the Templars stems from their association with spiritual rebellion and their willingness to die for their beliefs. Concluding that the Templars' story challenges us to consider the power of belief and the potential for individuals to choose death over compromising their principles, while acknowledging the complexities of interpreting such actions. Thus, the Templars challenge us to see the power in believing. But was the act of sacrificing themselves truly of their own will, or were they pawns in a much larger game? Having considered the Templars' embrace of redemptive action and their possible intent to shoulder the sins of the Church, we must now explore a more literal interpretation of this concept, potentially revealing the true reason for their intentional martyrdom. Could the Templars have viewed themselves as sin-eaters, deliberately absorbing the perceived sins of the Church and society to purify the world, thus embracing accusations of heresy as part of this self-sacrificial role? This leads us to the practice of sin-eating. Acknowledging our previous exploration of redemptive suicide and cosmic balance, and recapping the intentional martyrdom plot twist, we must now examine the historical practice of sin-eating and its potential connection to the Templars' actions and beliefs. Can this ancient ritual provide another clue to understanding the Templars' alleged heresy and their willingness to face accusations and death? We must consider this odd theory with the rest. To understand this seemingly bizarre connection, let us embark on a journey into the history of sin-eating, an ancient practice found in various cultures across the globe, often shrouded in mystery and superstition. This practice, though varied in its specifics, shares a common thread: the ritualistic transfer of sins from the deceased to another living being, thereby cleansing the departed soul and freeing it from earthly taints. What does this all mean? The origins of sin-eating can be traced back to ancient cultures, such as Judaism and pagan traditions, where rituals of purification and atonement were commonplace. In ancient Judaism, the scapegoat ritual involved symbolically transferring the sins of the people onto a goat, which was then released into the wilderness, carrying away the collective transgressions. Similarly, pagan traditions often involved sacrifices and offerings to appease deities and cleanse communities from impurity. Did the Templars believe in such rituals? The rituals involved in sin-eating typically included the consumption of food or drink that had been placed on the body of the deceased. In some cultures, a designated sin-eater would consume a piece of bread or a cup of ale that had been laid upon the chest of the departed, ritually absorbing their sins. This act was believed to transfer the sins of the deceased to the sin-eater, freeing them from punishment in the afterlife. In what other ways were sins transferred? The purpose of sin-eating was to transfer the sins of the deceased to another person, freeing them from punishment in the afterlife and to cleanse the earth of impurity. It was believed that the sins of the departed could linger in the world, causing unrest and misfortune. By transferring these sins to a sin-eater, the community could ensure that the deceased would find peace and that the world would be cleansed of their negative influence. The burden of sin-eating is a conscious choice, often undertaken by marginalized members of society who are willing to take on the spiritual consequences of absorbing another's transgressions. These individuals were often ostracized and feared, seen as tainted by the sins they carried. However, they were also respected for their willingness to perform this vital service, ensuring the well-being of both the living and the dead. Given this historical practice, we must examine the concept of sin as understood in medieval Christianity, emphasizing its connection to guilt, impurity, and the need for atonement. This will provide a crucial lens through which we can understand the Templars' alleged heresy as a burden they embraced for a higher purpose and their journey to intentional martyrdom. What impact does such a concept have? The Christian concept of original sin posits that all humans are born with a stain of transgression, inherited from Adam and Eve's disobedience in the Garden of Eden. This inherent sinfulness creates a separation between humanity and God, necessitating a means of atonement and reconciliation. This creates an interesting issue to grapple with. The Church played a pivotal role in mediating between God and humanity, offering a path to forgiveness and salvation through sacraments such as confession and penance. Through confession, individuals could acknowledge their sins and receive absolution from a priest, acting as God's representative on earth. Penance, in turn, involved performing acts of contrition and reparation, seeking to make amends for the harm caused by sin. Atonement and reconciliation held immense importance in Christian theology, serving as the means by which individuals could restore their relationship with God and find inner peace. Through faith, repentance, and participation in the sacraments, Christians could seek forgiveness for their sins and strive to live a life pleasing to God. What if the Templars decided the Church was corrupt? The social and psychological impact of guilt and the desire for forgiveness cannot be overstated. In medieval society, sin was not merely a theological concept, but a deeply ingrained aspect of daily life, shaping individuals' self-perception, social interactions, and aspirations for the afterlife. The weight of guilt could be a heavy burden, leading individuals to seek solace and redemption through the Church. Thus, with an understanding of sin in mind, we move on to the significance of sacrifice. Provide concrete examples of historical figures or groups who engaged in practices similar to sin eating, emphasizing their motivations, the perceived benefits of their actions, and their connection to sacrifice. In what ways can we connect the dots between those actions and the Templars? Consider the role of the scapegoat in ancient Jewish rituals, where a goat was symbolically burdened with the sins of the people and then released into the wilderness. This act of transferring sin to an animal and banishing it from the community served as a powerful metaphor for purification and renewal, allowing the people to cleanse themselves of their transgressions and begin anew. It offered a temporary reprieve. Explore the practices of flagellants in medieval Europe, who whipped themselves to atone for their own sins and the sins of others. These individuals believed that by inflicting physical pain upon themselves, they could share in the suffering of Christ and purify themselves and their communities from the scourge of sin. This was a public act of atonement, meant to inspire repentance and avert divine wrath. Analyze the symbolism of Jesus' death on the cross as a sacrifice to atone for the sins of humanity. Christians believe that Jesus, as the Son of God, willingly offered himself as a sacrifice to redeem humanity from its sins, paying the ultimate price for their salvation. His death is seen as the ultimate act of love and selflessness, paving the way for eternal life for those who believe in him. What made the Templars believe in their own version of sacrifice? Drawing connections between these figures and the Templars, we can begin to see them as similar agents of purification, who saw the corruption and the decay of the world and sought to step in. Did they see their actions as a necessary sacrifice to achieve a greater goal? Whether it was restoring spiritual purity to the Church, protecting secret knowledge, or challenging the established order, these figures provide a historical basis for the concept of sacrificing oneself for beliefs. Given these examples and this analysis, we can attempt to analyze the significance of the potential connection between the Templars and sin eating, suggesting they might have seen their deaths as a way to absorb the sins of the Church and to pave the way for a new spiritual order, emphasizing their intent and knowledge. In what other ways did they attempt to atone? The Templars, through their potential exposure to Gnostic beliefs, may have seen the Church as corrupt and in need of purification. Gnostic teachings often emphasized the importance of inner knowledge and direct experience of the divine, rather than relying solely on the authority of the Church. This could have led the Templars to view the Church as a flawed institution, ripe with hypocrisy and in need of reform. What would they replace it with? Explore the possibility that they deliberately embraced the accusations of heresy as a way to take on the sins of the Church and to offer themselves as a sacrifice for its redemption. By willingly accepting the label of heretics, the Templars could have seen themselves as absorbing the negative energy and corruption that plagued the Church, acting as a lightning rod for divine judgment. Is that why they accepted the title? Analyze the potential for their actions to be interpreted as a form of spiritual alchemy, transmuting their physical deaths into a spiritual purification of the world. Just as alchemists sought to transform base metals into gold, the Templars could have believed that their deaths would serve as a catalyst for spiritual transformation, leading to a new era of enlightenment and understanding. What if that was always their true mission? Thus, might the Templars have encoded their intention to act as sin eaters into their symbols, rituals, and architecture, leaving clues for future generations to understand their true purpose? What can these symbols teach us about their beliefs? Consider Templar symbols, such as the Baphomet idol, the Red Cross, and the two riders on one horse. Each of these are unique in their connection to the belief system. Could these symbols hold hidden meanings related to the concept of sin-eating and spiritual purification, awaiting discovery? Is there truth in these symbols? Explore the possibility that their architecture might have been designed to reflect these esoteric beliefs, with hidden chambers and symbolic layouts that conveyed their commitment to spiritual purification and transformation. Did the architecture itself tell their story? The Templars chose to face the fire rather than recant their beliefs, indicating they had knowledge that they were not willing to share with the world. They accepted their fate, but is any of this provable? It's essential to address the counterargument that the connection between the Templars and sin-eating is speculative and lacks direct historical support, emphasizing the importance of distinguishing between interpretation and evidence, while acknowledging the theory's explanatory power. Does that undermine the theory? It is important to acknowledge the limitations of historical evidence and the challenges of reconstructing the beliefs and motivations of the Templars. There is no smoking gun, no explicit statement from the Templars themselves declaring their intention to act as sin-eaters. What we have are fragments of information, open to multiple interpretations. Emphasizing the importance of avoiding anachronistic interpretations and imposing modern ideas onto a medieval context, we must be cautious about projecting our contemporary understanding of sin, sacrifice, and spiritual purification onto the Templars, recognizing that their worldview may have been vastly different from our own. Is there even a chance we're on the right track? Conceding that a direct, demonstrable link between the Templars' intentional martyrdom and their conscious embrace of sin-eating may be impossible to establish with certainty. But even if we cannot definitively prove this connection, the theory offers a compelling lens through which to view their actions and beliefs. It allows us to explore their potential motivations, their relationship with the Church, and their enduring legacy. Despite these challenges, we must reaffirm the value of exploring the potential connection between the Templars and sin-eating, even if speculative, as a way of understanding their willingness to embrace intentional martyrdom and to challenge the established order by synthesizing the themes of sacrifice and intentionality. What do these sacrifices mean to us today? In synthesizing the information presented, we can highlight the key themes and arguments related to the potential for the Templars' intentional martyrdom as a choice, and how that choice may have come about. They may have seen themselves as similar to the sin-eaters of old, willingly taking on the burden of the Church's sins in order to purify it from within. We must suggest that the enduring fascination with the Templars stems from their association with unwavering conviction, spiritual rebellion, and the willingness to die for their beliefs. They are remembered as more than just warriors or bankers. They are seen as symbols of defiance, sacrifice, and the pursuit of hidden knowledge. Concluding that the Templars' story challenges us to consider the power of belief and the potential for individuals to choose death over compromising their principles, even when that choice involves embracing condemnation and absorbing the sins of others, thus emphasizing their active role in their own demise. But we must ask ourselves, if they willingly took on the sins of the Church, what were they attempting to hide from the world? Having explored the potential for the Templars to have embraced the role of sin-eaters, deliberately absorbing the perceived sins of the Church and society, did they encode this self-sacrificial role into their symbols, rituals, and architecture, leaving a message for future generations? Acknowledging our prior sections on sin-eating, redemptive suicide, and Gnostic connections, and recapping the core argument of intentional martyrdom, we must now examine specific Templar symbols and practices through the lens of sin-eating, seeking evidence of intentional messaging. What secrets might they have hidden in plain sight? Before we can dissect the Templars' symbols and their practices, we must first look at medieval symbolism, highlighting its importance in conveying complex ideas and beliefs in a predominantly illiterate society. Understanding this framework is essential to deciphering whether the Templars used symbols as a sophisticated form of communication. After all, if the population was primarily illiterate, they would need to find other ways to get their message across. Symbolism permeated medieval art, architecture, and literature. From the elaborate stained glass windows of cathedrals to the intricate carvings on tombs, symbols served as a visual language that conveyed religious, moral, and philosophical concepts to a largely illiterate populace. The cross, the lamb, and the dove were immediately recognizable symbols of Christianity, each carrying layers of theological meaning that transcended the written word. The cultural context in which these symbols were created and interpreted is of utmost importance. A symbol's message is inextricably linked to the intention of its creator and the understanding of its audience. What did the Templars intend to communicate with their emblems? The accusations against the Templars often centered on their alleged worship of the Baphomet idol. What if the Baphomet idol, with its various symbolic elements, was not an object of heretical worship, but a representation of sin-eating, atonement, and spiritual purification? What if the image itself was meant to be a key to absolution? Consider the goat's head of Baphomet, often seen as a symbol of evil. What if it represents the scapegoat, burdened with the sins of others, as described in ancient Jewish rituals? The Templars, through this symbolism, may have been acknowledging their willingness to bear the weight of the world's transgressions, much like the scapegoat banished into the wilderness. In what ways can the accusations be twisted? The androgynous nature of Baphomet, combining male and female characteristics, could symbolize the transcendence of earthly desires and the embrace of spiritual purity. By transcending the limitations of gender, Baphomet embodies a state of wholeness and spiritual perfection, suggesting the Templars sought to rise above the temptations of the flesh and attain a higher state of being. In what other ways did they embrace spiritual purity? The raised hand gesture of Baphomet, often interpreted as a sign of blessing or benediction, may represent absolution or the transference of sins. The Templars, through this gesture, could have been symbolically offering forgiveness to those burdened by sin, or perhaps even claiming the power to absolve sins themselves. But why would they claim such a power? These symbolic interpretations, when related back to the concept of sin-eating, reveal the Templars' potential role as agents of purification. What if they were not heretics, but rather spiritual warriors, fighting against the darkness by absorbing the sins of the world? Is that why they embraced the title of heretic? Beyond individual symbols, we must explore the potential for Templar architecture, churches, castles, etc., to have been designed with hidden symbolic meanings related to sin-eating and spiritual purification. Could their physical structures have served as encoded messages? What if the buildings themselves were part of a grand, esoteric design? Templar churches and castles were often constructed with specific architectural features, such as arches, columns, and stained glass windows, to convey symbolic messages. The arch, for example, could represent the passage from the earthly realm to the divine, while the column could symbolize strength, stability, and the connection between heaven and earth. The stained glass windows, with their vibrant colors and intricate designs, could have served as visual representations of biblical stories, moral lessons, or esoteric teachings. What stories were the buildings trying to tell? The layout and orientation of Templar churches may have reflected their beliefs about sin, atonement, and the afterlife. Many Templar churches were oriented east-west, with the altar facing east towards the rising sun, symbolizing the resurrection of Christ and the hope of eternal life. The directional orientation of structures could have been a key component in a complex messaging system. The layout of the church, with its nave, aisles, and chapels, could have been designed to guide the worshipper on a spiritual journey from the darkness of sin to the light of salvation. How were they trying to guide others? Could hidden chambers or secret passages within Templar structures have served as symbolic representations of inner purification or spiritual transformation? These hidden spaces, often accessible only to initiates or those with special knowledge, could have been used for secret rituals, initiations, or the ka-er-a-n-ye-n-e-ye of sacred objects. They could have symbolized the inner journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening, leading to a deeper understanding of the mysteries of the universe. What kind of mysteries were they trying to protect? Furthermore, we must analyze the Templars' potential engagement in specific rituals or ceremonies designed to symbolize the cleansing of sins, with a particular focus on their emphasis on confession and absolution. What if these rituals were influenced by Gnostic or mystery traditions, adding another layer of esoteric meaning? Could they have seen confession in a different light? Confession, in Christian tradition, is a way to acknowledge and atone for sins. Individuals could seek forgiveness and reconciliation with God. The Templars, as devout Christians, undoubtedly participated in the sacrament of confession, seeking absolution for their transgressions and striving to live a life pleasing to God. Was it merely an act of worship? It is possible that the Templars developed their own unique rituals of confession, perhaps influenced by Gnostic or mystery traditions. These rituals may have involved secret oaths, symbolic gestures, or the recitation of esoteric prayers, designed to purify the soul and prepare it for spiritual enlightenment. They may have seen the act of confession as a public demonstration of their commitment to spiritual purity and a way to absorb the sins of others. What could they have been confessing to? But what does all of this mean for the future of the Templars and the secrets that they protected? As we transition to the next section, we must consider that these symbols and rituals continue to resonate with those who seek spiritual purification and a deeper understanding of the Templars' true purpose. Could these symbols continue to hold hidden meanings for those who are initiated into esoteric traditions? Could the Templars' legacy as sin-eaters continue to inspire those who seek to purify themselves and the world around them? It's essential to address the counterargument that these interpretations of Templar symbols and rituals are highly subjective and open to multiple interpretations. Are we imposing a singular, definitive meaning? Can we truly know what these symbols meant to the Templars themselves? The inherent ambiguity of symbolism and the challenges of interpreting ancient texts and artifacts cannot be understated. Symbols, by their very nature, are open to multiple interpretations, depending on the context, the culture, and the individual's perspective. What one person sees as a representation of sin-eating, another may see as a symbol of power, wealth, or even heresy. Should we even attempt to decipher the symbols that they created? While we need to consider alternative interpretations of Templar symbols and rituals, taking into account the historical and cultural context in which they were created, and conceding that it's impossible to know for certain what the Templars themselves intended to convey through their symbols and rituals, we still must question how they acted. Despite the varying interpretations, actions speak louder than words. How should we analyze those actions? Despite these limitations, it's important to reaffirm the value of exploring the potential for Templar symbols and rituals to have encoded a message of sin-eating and spiritual purification, even if these interpretations are speculative. We need to emphasize the importance of considering the broader context of their actions, beliefs, and the accusations against them. After all, even if we cannot definitively prove that the Templars saw themselves as sin-eaters, their story challenges us to consider the power of symbols to convey complex ideas and the potential for individuals to choose death over compromising their principles. In synthesizing the information presented, we can highlight the key themes and arguments related to the potential for the Templars to have encoded a message of sin eating into their symbols and rituals, suggesting that the enduring fascination with the Templars stems from their association with unwavering conviction, spiritual rebellion, and the willingness to die for their beliefs, even when those beliefs involve taking on the sins of others. The Templars are an inspiration to us, but what truths remain hidden about their practices? Having explored the potential for the Templars to have intentionally encoded their role as sin eaters, taking on the sins of the Church and society in a redemptive act of self-sacrifice, what if this interpretation holds relevance beyond the medieval context, resonating within modern spirituality? Acknowledging our prior sections on sin eating, redemptive suicide, Gnostic connections, and recapping the core argument of intentional martyrdom, we must now examine the echoes of this sacrifice in contemporary spiritual movements and individual practices. How does this historical event connect to modern spiritual thought? To understand how the Templars might resonate with modern spiritual seekers, it's crucial to provide a concise overview of the rise of modern spirituality, emphasizing its origins in the rejection of traditional religious institutions and its focus on individual experience and self-discovery. Modern spirituality, unlike organized religion, often prioritizes personal experience over dogma and individual interpretation over institutional authority. This shift represents a profound change in how individuals seek meaning and purpose in their lives. The Enlightenment and Romanticism, with their emphasis on individual reason and emotion, profoundly influenced the development of modern spirituality. The Enlightenment challenged traditional religious authority, emphasizing reason and empirical observation as the primary sources of knowledge. Romanticism, in turn, celebrated individual emotion, imagination, and the beauty of nature as paths to spiritual insight. These movements paved the way for the emergence of alternative spiritual paths that prioritized individual experience and self-discovery over adherence to established doctrines. In the 19th and 20th centuries, this led to the rise of movements such as Theosophy, spiritualism, and the New Age, each offering unique approaches to spiritual exploration outside the confines of traditional religion. Dissatisfaction with traditional, institutionalized religion only further cemented these ideals. What key themes emerged from these alternative spiritual movements? The core themes of modern spirituality revolve around spiritual autonomy, syncretism, and personal transformation, each representing a departure from traditional religious structures. Spiritual autonomy emphasizes the individual's right to choose their own beliefs and practices, rejecting external authority in favor of personal guidance. Syncretism involves the blending of different religious and spiritual traditions into personalized belief systems, drawing inspiration from diverse sources to create a unique spiritual path. Personal transformation is viewed as a lifelong journey of self-discovery and spiritual growth, emphasizing the ongoing process of evolving one's understanding and experience of the divine. How do these themes differ from traditional concepts of spiritual authority and doctrine? The Templars, particularly the intentional martyrdom narrative and the sin eater interpretation, offer a compelling archetype for modern spiritual seekers, emphasizing themes of rebellion against oppressive structures, seeking forbidden knowledge, and embracing individual spiritual authority. The Templars' alleged defiance of the Church, their rumored possession of secret knowledge, and their willingness to challenge established norms resonate deeply with those who reject institutionalized religion and seek alternative paths to spiritual enlightenment. Are the Templars, then, symbols of individual spiritual empowerment and the rejection of external authority? Could their rebellion be a blueprint for other oppressed peoples? The idea of the Templars possessing secret knowledge, perhaps Gnostic or esoteric wisdom suppressed by the Church, aligns with the modern quest for hidden truths and esoteric wisdom. Many modern spiritual seekers are drawn to alternative sources of knowledge, such as ancient texts, occult traditions, and mystical practices, seeking insights that challenge conventional narratives and offer a deeper understanding of reality. The Templars, in this context, become symbols of the pursuit of forbidden knowledge, inspiring individuals to question established beliefs and seek their own spiritual truths. The connection between that rebellious spirit and their apparent martyrdom serves as a final act of defiance. But what does this mean for the future? Analyzing the significance of the Templars' alleged sin-eating role in relation to modern spirituality reveals a potent symbol of self-sacrifice and empowerment. Their self-sacrifice can be seen as a form of spiritual agency, challenging traditional notions of victimhood and inspiring individuals to take control of their own spiritual destinies and challenge oppressive systems. By willingly taking on the perceived sins of others, the Templars may have been demonstrating a commitment to spiritual purification and a willingness to bear the burdens of the world. Does their intentional martyrdom transform sacrifice into a form of spiritual agency? Perhaps their actions inspire individuals to confront their own fears of death and to live more authentically, embracing their true selves without fear of judgment or persecution. Their story can be interpreted as a call to action, urging individuals to challenge injustice and to create a more equitable and compassionate world. In choosing their legacy, the Templars redefined the nature of sacrifice. How did this affect others? Specific modern spiritual groups or individuals have undoubtedly drawn inspiration from the Templars and their alleged sin-eating role, connecting the historical narrative to contemporary practices. Numerous modern spiritual groups claim a connection to the Templars, incorporating Templar symbolism and mythology into their practices. These groups may see the Templars as role models for spiritual rebellion and self-sacrifice, emulating their commitment to challenging established systems and seeking forbidden knowledge. The Templars' story continues to resonate with those who seek to create a more just and equitable world. But are these modern followers correct in their assumptions? However, the connection between the Templars and modern spirituality could be seen as tenuous and based on selective interpretation, emphasizing the differences between medieval and modern worldviews and the risks of anachronism. It's crucial to acknowledge the potential for imposing modern values and beliefs onto a medieval context, potentially distorting the Templars' true motivations and beliefs. The romanticized image of the Templars that exists in popular culture often bears little resemblance to the historical reality. How can we know if modern groups properly understand the Templars? While a direct, demonstrable link between the Templars' actions and modern spiritual practices may be difficult to establish with certainty, the value of exploring the potential connections between the Templars and modern spirituality lies in understanding the enduring power of sacrifice, intention, and spiritual rebellion across different eras. Despite the differences between the medieval and modern worlds, the human desire for meaning, purpose, and spiritual connection remains constant. The enduring fascination with the Templars stems from their association with challenging established systems, seeking forbidden knowledge, and embracing intentionality. The Templars' story challenges us to consider the power of belief and the potential for individuals to choose their own spiritual paths, and the power that those choices can have even centuries later. If such a sacrifice and intent offers a unique opportunity to define one's legacy, what does it mean for other legacies and for our understanding of the future? Having explored the echoes of Templar sacrifice in modern spirituality, what if the Templars themselves consciously orchestrated this resonance? Building upon our prior discussions of redemptive suicide and sin-eating, we must now delve into the possibility that the Templars intentionally wove a message of self-sacrifice into the very fabric of their symbols and structures, aiming to communicate a hidden purpose to future generations. Was their martyrdom not merely a tragic end, but a deliberate act, a final sermon delivered in stone and symbol, Let us now dissect the Templars' core symbols and structures, seeking evidence of a coded message of self-sacrifice and spiritual purification, intentionally left for those who know how to see. To truly grasp the potential for such deliberate encoding, we must first briefly immerse ourselves in the world of medieval symbolism. The Middle Ages was steeped in esoteric symbolism, a language woven into art, architecture, and literature. More than mere decoration, symbolism served as a potent method of communicating complex or hidden ideas, particularly crucial in an era of limited literacy and ever-present potential for persecution. Religious symbolism, drawing from Christian, Jewish, and even pagan traditions, permeated nearly every facet of medieval life, offering layers of meaning accessible only to initiates or those possessing specific knowledge. How did this language function, and how might the Templars have mastered its nuances? Esoteric symbols, prevalent throughout the medieval world, were rarely straightforward, instead layered with multiple meanings, creating a complex tapestry of understanding. Symbolism served as a potent tool for conveying potentially dangerous or even heretical ideas with discretion. Influences such as alchemy, with its secret language of transformation, sacred geometry, believed to unlock the secrets of cosmic harmony, and astrology, mapping the influence of celestial bodies on human affairs, all deeply impacted medieval symbolism. This potent cocktail of influences provided a rich and complex symbolic language, a language that may have been carefully used by the Knights Templar. But what specific messages might they have encoded? Let us now revisit the enigmatic figure of Baphomet, not as a mere idol, but as a complex tapestry of symbols potentially representing sacrifice, transformation, and the absorption of sin. The infamous goat's head, often cited as evidence of the Templars' heretical practices, might instead represent the scapegoat, an ancient symbol of bearing the weight of societal sins. The androgynous nature of the figure could symbolize the union of opposites, the transcendence of earthly desires achieved through spiritual purification. Could the Templars have understood Baphomet not as an entity to be worshipped, but as a symbolic representation of their own spiritual journey? Furthermore, the raised hand gesture of Baphomet, often misinterpreted as a blessing, might instead be a symbolic act of transferring or absorbing impurities, a gesture of taking on the burdens of others. The torch held aloft, rather than representing mere illumination, could signify enlightenment gained through sacrifice, the unwavering will to act with purpose even in the face of death. When viewed through this lens, Baphomet transforms from a symbol of heresy into a potent allegory of sacrifice, transformation, and the potential for spiritual purification. How might the Templars have embraced this interpretation and integrated it into their self-understanding? Beyond symbolism, let us investigate Templar architectural designs, seeking evidence of intentional construction, reflecting themes of sacrifice and spiritual transformation. The eastward orientation of Templar churches, a common practice in Christian architecture, could have held a deeper significance for the Templars, symbolizing the rising sun, spiritual rebirth, and the triumph of light over darkness. Furthermore, the use of specific geometric patterns, such as the vesica piscis, and numerical ratios, such as the Fibonacci sequence, may have served as coded representations of cosmic harmony and the divine order. Was this simply adherence to architectural norms, or did it represent a deliberate attempt to encode spiritual truths into their physical structures? Even hidden chambers or secret passages discovered within some Templar structures may not have been merely practical or defensive features. These spaces could represent symbolic representations of inner purification, a physical manifestation of spiritual transformation through isolation and reflection. Take, for example, the Temple Church in London, with its circular nave reminiscent of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Could this design have been intended to evoke the sacrifice of Christ and the promise of resurrection? The question remains, Are these patterns intentional or mere coincidence? To fully understand the Templars' message, we must also analyze their rituals and practices, searching for deliberate actions that communicated their understanding of sacrifice and their commitment to acting as sin eaters. The Templar initiation ceremony, with its alleged acts of denial and desecration, may not have been evidence of heresy, but rather a symbolic shedding of old identities, a necessary step in embracing a new spiritual path. Further, the Templars' emphasis on communal meals and shared resources could represent a symbolic representation of unity and selflessness, reinforcing their commitment to the collective good and their willingness to sacrifice individual desires for the sake of the order. What then of their daily lives spoke to this ideal? Moreover, the act of confession and absolution within the Templar order, often viewed as a standard religious practice, can also be reinterpreted as a symbolic act of taking on the burdens of others, offering spiritual purification not just for themselves, but for those they served. This act of spiritual cleansing could be seen as a microcosm of their wider mission, a daily practice of embodying the role of sin eaters. These specific actions, viewed through the lens of intentional martyrdom, paint a portrait of the Templars as active participants in a drama of sacrifice and redemption. But how did they intend for this message to endure? This encoded intentionality, embedded within Templar symbols and structures, served as a lasting message, a carefully constructed ideology designed to survive their physical destruction and reach future generations. The survival of Templar symbols within Freemasonry and other esoteric traditions hints at the enduring power of their coded message. Perhaps these symbols continue to inspire individuals to challenge authority and pursue spiritual liberation, acting as silent beacons across the centuries. Their legacy, then, resides not just in their historical actions, but in the enduring power of their coded message, whispering secrets to those who know how to listen. But can we truly be sure we are hearing the Templars' intent or our own? However, it is crucial to acknowledge that these interpretations are influenced by modern biases and esoteric frameworks. We must exercise caution against reading too much into historical evidence and respect the limitations of historical analysis. The subjective nature of symbolic interpretation makes it difficult to definitively determine the Templars' true intentions. Reconstructing Templar beliefs and practices remains challenging, given the incomplete and often biased historical records available to us. Is it possible that, in our quest to uncover hidden meanings, we are simply projecting our own desires and beliefs onto the Templars? Despite these limitations, exploring the potential for encoded messages of sacrifice within Templar symbols and structures remains valuable. The enduring fascination with the Templars stems from their unwavering conviction, their spiritual rebellion, and the profound implications of their choice to define their own legacy. The Templars' story, whether viewed as historical fact or symbolic allegory, challenges us to consider the enduring power of symbols to convey complex ideas and inspire acts of self-sacrifice across generations. As we consider their legacy, do their choices offer insight into how we too can choose our fate? And if their legacy was sacrifice, what awaits us next? Having deciphered the potential for encoded messages within Templar symbols and structures, what unifying philosophy might have driven them to such lengths, even to embrace martyrdom? We've journeyed through interpretations of Gnosticism, mystery religions, a warrior code, and even sin-eating. Let us now consider that the Templars' demise was not a defeat, but a carefully orchestrated act, the culmination of a deeply held belief system designed to resonate across the ages. The intention here is to synthesize these seemingly disparate threads into a cohesive whole, presenting a philosophical framework that might explain the Templars' actions and their lasting impact. But to consider the Templars' actions as intentional, we must consider precedent. History provides ample examples of individuals and groups who embraced fatal actions to affirm their core tenets of faith and to galvanize believers after their deaths. Consider the biblical story of Samson, who, in his final act of defiance, destroyed the Philistine temple, sacrificing himself to strike a blow against his enemies and affirming his commitment to God. Recall the Battle of Thermopylae, where King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans faced certain death against a vastly superior Persian army, their courage inspiring future generations to resist tyranny. Think, too, of the defenders of Masada, who chose suicide rather than surrender to the Roman legions, their act becoming a symbol of Jewish resistance and national identity. These were not simply moments of despair, but carefully constructed acts of defiance meant to inspire generations. Beyond individual actions, let us consider the esoteric principle of collective intention or thought form, a concept distinct from modern groupthink. Esoteric thought suggests that focused thought and emotion can shape reality, that shared beliefs can coalesce into a powerful thought form existing independently of individual minds. Imagine a sustained, collective belief generating a palpable energy, influencing events and inspiring action. Could the Templars have believed that their martyrdom could create such a spiritual ripple effect, a wave of inspiration that would break against the shores of the future, inspiring generations to question authority and seek spiritual liberation? This is not mere groupthink, where conformity reigns supreme, but a profound spiritual alignment, where individual conviction fuels a collective purpose. History and mythology further present examples of groups seemingly driven by a similar belief in the power of collective sacrifice to achieve a specific goal. The early Christian martyrs, facing persecution and death for their faith, played a pivotal role in the explosive growth of Christianity, their sacrifices becoming powerful testaments to their beliefs. Consider, too, the Buddhist concept of Sangha, where the collective energy of the community is believed to accelerate spiritual progress, with each member contributing to the overall spiritual advancement. Or examine the symbolism of the Grail quest in Arthurian legends, where the collective pursuit of the Grail leads to spiritual transformation, a shared yearning unlocking hidden potential. Might the Templars have envisioned their martyrdom as a similar act of collective spiritual power, a sacrifice that would unlock a new era of spiritual understanding? With this foundation in mind, we can reassess potential motivations. What if the Templars saw their martyrdom as a way to seed the world with a new spiritual paradigm, a direct challenge to the established order? Perhaps they deliberately embraced accusations of heresy, understanding that such disruption was necessary to shatter the complacency of the Church and inspire others to question authority. Imagine their actions as a form of spiritual warfare, using sacrifice as a tool to dismantle oppressive structures and pave the way for a new era of spiritual enlightenment. What if their defiance, their embrace of heresy, was a deliberate act of rebellion designed to resonate through the centuries? But this presents an immediate question. How might the Templars have consciously tried to encode this philosophical message into their final actions? The steadfast refusal of many Templars to recant their alleged heresies, even under torture, becomes particularly significant in this light. What if their defiant silence or their cryptic statements were carefully calculated to provoke further thought and inquiry, to sow seeds of doubt within the minds of their persecutors and future generations? Their willingness to endure torture and death may have been a conscious choice, a powerful demonstration of their conviction and a way to inspire others to follow their path, even in the face of unimaginable adversity. But did that defiance actually work? However, such interpretations are inherently subjective. We must acknowledge that this reading of history is highly speculative, relying on imposing esoteric concepts onto historical events. Reconstructing the Templars' inner thoughts and motivations is fraught with challenges, given the limited and often biased historical records available to us. Can we ever truly know what was in their hearts and minds as they faced their final moments? It is impossible to definitively prove that the Templars consciously sought to create a collective thought form through their martyrdom. Despite these limitations, exploring this potential philosophical framework remains valuable. The enduring fascination with the Templars stems from their unwavering conviction, their association with spiritual rebellion, and the profound implications of their choices. Even if we cannot definitively prove their intent, what can we glean from the actions that the Templars deliberately undertook? The Templars' story, whether viewed as historical fact or symbolic allegory, challenges us to consider the power of belief and the potential for individuals to shape the future through their thoughts, actions, and sacrifices. And if the Templars did intend their actions to influence the future, what was the key they intentionally left for us to find, and what awaits us if we do? Having established the potential for encoded messages driving the Templars' actions, let us delve into a doctrine that synthesizes Gnosticism, mystery religions, a warrior code, sin-eating, and the idea of intentional martyrdom into a single, driving force. While we have explored these interpretations individually, let us now consider them as interconnected facets of a unified philosophy, a Templar doctrine designed to motivate their actions and secure their legacy. The intention here is to weave these disparate threads into a cohesive whole, presenting a framework that might explain the Templars' actions and lasting impact. Let us briefly recap the core elements of this proposed doctrine, presenting them as interconnected pillars. First, the potential Gnostic influences, the pursuit of hidden knowledge, and the belief that the material world is a flawed creation. Second, the warrior code with its emphasis on obedience, discipline, and self-sacrifice, demanding unwavering commitment to a higher cause. Third, the concept of sin-eating, the potential for the Templars to see themselves as agents of purification, absorbing the sins of the world to restore cosmic balance. All of these points, however, are centered around their overarching intention. Let us now articulate this Templar doctrine as a unified philosophical framework, outlining its core tenets and emphasizing the interconnectedness of its various elements. Imagine it as a tapestry, each thread representing a different belief, yet woven together to create a complete picture. At its heart lies the pursuit of spiritual liberation through gnosis, a direct experience of divine truth that transcends dogma and tradition. Intertwined with this is the restoration of cosmic balance by embracing the divine feminine, challenging patriarchal structures, and restoring wholeness to the divine. Further woven in is the purification of the world through the absorption of sin, a willingness to confront darkness and transform it into light. The attainment of spiritual power through sacrifice and intention is the loom upon which the tapestry is made. Reassessing each tenet through the lens of Gnostic wisdom, we see a deliberate path towards spiritual evolution. Analyzing the Templars' final actions, their steadfast refusal to recant, their defiant statements, their willingness to endure torture as deliberate manifestations of this Templar doctrine, we begin to understand their message. Their unwavering obedience to their superiors, often seen as blind loyalty, can be interpreted as stemming from a deeper commitment to this Templar doctrine. Their defiance, their refusal to compromise their beliefs, becomes a calculated act of spiritual rebellion against a corrupt church, a conscious rejection of earthly authority in favor of divine truth. Their willingness to endure suffering was seen as a way to demonstrate the truth of their beliefs and to inspire future generations. Their intentions were set to make an eternal statement. Consider the potential influence of the Templars on the development of Freemasonry and its emphasis on self-improvement and social justice. The Freemasons, with their secret rituals and symbolic architecture, echo the Templars' commitment to hidden knowledge and a hierarchical structure. Explore the connections between the Templars and later esoteric traditions, such as Rosicrucianism and Hermeticism, each building upon the Templars' alleged secrets and their pursuit of spiritual enlightenment. What about the potential for the Templars to have inspired future generations of spiritual seekers, rebels, and revolutionaries, individuals who challenged the status quo and sought to create a better world. What is their influence today? This leads us to consider that the Templars consciously encoded this Templar doctrine into their symbols, rituals, and architecture, leaving a coded message for those who were able to understand it. Consider the Baphomet idol, often seen as a symbol of heresy, but perhaps representing the union of opposites, the reconciliation of male and female, human and animal. The Red Cross, a symbol of sacrifice and redemption, may have held hidden meanings related to the Templar doctrine. What if their architecture was designed to reflect these esoteric beliefs, with hidden chambers and symbolic alignments revealing deeper truths? And what would be the purpose of communicating in symbols? But let us address the counterargument that this unified philosophy is an oversimplification, a modern construct imposed on historical events. Underscore that this Templar doctrine is a modern interpretation. We must acknowledge the limitations of historical evidence and the challenges of reconstructing medieval beliefs, given the biases and agendas of the chroniclers. We must emphasize the importance of avoiding anachronistic interpretations and recognizing the subjectivity of symbolic analysis. It's impossible to definitively prove that the Templars consciously adhered to this exact philosophical framework, and even harder to prove the degree to which they did. So, what are the limits of interpretation? Despite these limitations, exploring this potential philosophical framework remains valuable as a way of understanding the Templars' enduring mystery, their embrace of intentional martyrdom, and the potential for it all to be a lie or the ultimate truth. By synthesizing the information presented, highlighting the key themes and arguments related to the Templar doctrine and its potential influence on their actions, we come closer to understanding the truth. Perhaps the enduring fascination with the Templars stems from their association with spiritual rebellion and their willingness to sacrifice everything for their beliefs. Their story, whether viewed as historical fact or symbolic allegory, challenges us to consider the power of belief and the potential for individuals to shape their own destinies, and perhaps what awaits them in their ultimate fate. But with all of this laid before us, we must ask ourselves one last, critical question: what awaits us? As we draw together these threads of history, mystery, and esoteric interpretation, we arrive at a point of convergence, the end of our exploration into the world of the Knights Templar. What began as a historical investigation has led us through the realms of religious heresy, occult symbolism, and the enduring power of secret societies. Though many questions remain unanswered, shrouded in the mists of time and intentional obscurity, we hope to have illuminated the path toward a deeper understanding of the Templars and their enduring secrets. Our central theme, the occult secrets of the Knights Templar, comes to its ultimate conclusion in the revelations that are about to be delivered. Let us now succinctly revisit the Templars' saga, focusing on the key points that have shaped our understanding. The accusations of heresy and idol worship, particularly surrounding the enigmatic figure of Baphomet, served as the catalyst for their downfall. Interpretations of Baphomet have ranged from a symbol of devilry to a representation of hidden knowledge and spiritual rebellion. However, a more nuanced perspective suggests the Templars embraced the idea of intentional martyrdom, consciously engineering their demise to achieve a specific, long-term objective. Each of these facets of the Templar story contributes to a richer understanding of their possible intentions. Reassessing each tenet through the lens of esoteric wisdom, we approach a deeper understanding of how each element influenced their final legacy. Synthesizing the Templar doctrine, we see that their actions were all intended to achieve a specific goal. By delving into esoteric traditions and weaving them into their own unique doctrine, they sought to create something that would transcend the limitations of their physical existence. Their goal was to trigger some kind of long-term effect, a ripple in the fabric of reality that would resonate through the ages. All of their actions, from their battlefield valor to their alleged heretical practices, point to a specific intention. The truth of this intention, however, remains open for each viewer to discern, as the Templars themselves may have sought to plant a seed of questioning rather than provide a definitive answer. In short, the Templars sought to transcend what they were and become something more. This leads us to a profound philosophical question about the nature of sacrifice, intention, and the enduring human quest for spiritual meaning. Did the Templars truly choose their fate, consciously embracing martyrdom as a means to achieve their goals, or were they merely victims of circumstance, caught in the machinations of political and religious power? What does their story tell us about the power of belief and the willingness to die for one's convictions? How do we reconcile the conflicting interpretations of their actions and their legacy, separating fact from fiction, truth from propaganda? It is important to emphasize that this question of interpretation is central to understanding the Templars. The answer is forever personal. Despite our efforts to unravel the mysteries surrounding the Templars, many questions remain unresolved. The limitations of historical evidence and the speculative nature of numerous interpretations underscore the challenges of definitively understanding their beliefs and motivations. It is imperative to approach their story with critical thinking and an open mind, acknowledging the inherent ambiguity and the potential for multiple valid perspectives. The Templars' enduring appeal lies, in part, with this openness to interpretation, their story acting as a Rorschach test for our own beliefs and biases. The search for truth is ongoing, open to new evidence and ever-evolving interpretations. But what if the very accusations leveled against the Templars were not external forces, but rather carefully constructed elements of their own grand design? What if the Templars intentionally courted controversy, fostered rumors of heresy, and ultimately orchestrated their own downfall in order to gain a measure of immortality, a lasting influence on the course of history? In this light, the truth of their beliefs may be less important than their martyrdom itself, the act of defiance becoming a symbol of spiritual rebellion that resonates through the centuries. The creation of intentional martyrdom requires someone to bring about that intent, an initial spark to ignite the flames of change. The very act of creating intent can influence the universe, bending the course of events to align with one's will. Their sacrifice has rippled through history to our current era, shaping the landscape of esoteric thought and inspiring countless individuals to question authority and seek hidden knowledge. It's even possible that the sacrifice might allow them to rise up as gods. We invite you to delve deeper into the mysteries of the past, present, and future by continuing to engage with our channel's content. Share your thoughts and interpretations in the comments section, fostering a community of seekers and challenging one another's perspectives. Subscribe to our channel for more content on esoteric topics as we continue to explore the hidden corners of history and the enduring power of myth. Upcoming videos and series will delve into even more forbidden secrets, further expanding our understanding of the forces that shape our world. Connect with other viewers who share your curiosity and join us on this journey of discovery. The shadows whisper their secrets. What will you find? Await further revelation, if the shadows allow it.